The case of Liana Friedenbach. Liana Friedenbach was born in Sao Paulo in May 1987. She grew up in a wealthy family and is the eldest of two children. Her father, Henry Friedenbach, is a successful and respected lawyer in the city. Her boyfriend Felipe Café, who comes from the same city, was born in July 1984. However, he was raised in a large family with quite difficult economic conditions. Since childhood, he had to work part-time to support himself and help his family. When the two met while still in school, they gradually developed a friendship and then became the first love of their youth. They had to hide their relationship in every possible way. It is worth noting that Liana's parents were religious and raised their daughter strictly. Liana was educated in religious values and participated in religious activities since she was a child, and her parents did not support romantic relationships when she was young. In addition, social inequality also played an important role. Liana came from a wealthy family, but she chose a man from a poor family. The prohibition of her parents did not make the young people give up on each other, but on the contrary, they decided to hide their relationship and secretly date in private places to avoid detection. In the fall of 2003, Liana and Felipe planned a trip to a remote and deserted land. Before starting the trip, they prepared carefully so as not to be discovered by their families. Felipe informed his parents that he was going camping with his friends, while Liana said that she was going to visit a church with her friends. She thought that this reason was convincing enough for her parents to believe her and agree to let her go without further questions. Liana and Felipe's family believed the story the children had created, so Liana and Felipe could enjoy life without worrying about their families finding out. The two were happy to be able to spend a week together. Liana and Felipe decided to go to Uji Guasu province, which had beautiful scenery. They brought with them essentials such as tents, sleeping bags, personal belongings, and some food supplies. However, financial problems caused difficulties for the young couple. As students, they were entitled to free public transportation, so they made detailed plans to get to their destination by bus. On the early morning of October 31st, Liana and Felipe met at the designated location. They kept the meeting a secret for fear of being discovered. First, they took the first bus, then arrived at another city in the evening. Here, they stayed overnight at the bus station. Then, they continued traveling by two more buses to reach their desired destination. They then walked a few kilometers to a secluded spot in the forest, where they planned to make a fire and enjoy some private time together. The weather was warm, with a little sunshine, and although a little tired from the long journey, Liana and Felipe were still happy, joking and planning their vacation. As the couple walked through the forest to the abandoned farm where they planned to stay, they caught the eye of a group of locals near a pond. They were Paulo Cesar de Silva Marquez, nicknamed Pernambuco, and Roberto Alves Cardoso, known as Chino. Chino, 16 years old but already the leader of the gang, thought that there was something valuable in the couple's backpack. The robbers stealthily followed the couple and hid deep in the bushes. While Liana and Felipe set up their tent and had a snack, they were unaware that they were being followed. The robbers waited until they were sure that there were only two young men and that they were not carrying weapons. Then Pernambuco and Chino attacked Liana and Felipe. The robbers searched all the bags and backpacks, but found nothing of value. The robbers then decided that they could demand ransom from the couple's relatives. Liana, too scared, immediately said that she came from a wealthy family and that her father would give them as much money as they wanted. The robbers were delighted to hear this information. While the plan to extort money was being finalized, the robbers thought about how much money they could extort. To prevent the couple from escaping, the robbers took them to an abandoned house near the farm, but the house had no windows or doors. They then decided to take the couple to the house of a gang member. When the robbers could not find the way to collect the ransom, they tied up and brutally beat Felipe, so that he could not escape or resist. Then all the gang members took turns raping Liana. After torturing the two for a while, the next morning, the robbers took the couple to a secluded place in the forest. The robbers led Felipe, who was seriously injured, deep into the forest. Then, there was a gunshot from deep in the forest. Liana realized what had happened and that her lover was no longer alive. The robbers told her that they had released Felipe and that the robbers wanted to keep her, treating her like a toy until they got bored of her. After their daughter left, Liana's parents soon discovered that she had not gone on a church outing with her friends as she had said. Her parents were also unable to contact her friends to find out where she had gone. Liana's family suspected that their daughter might have run away with her boyfriend and decided to contact his parents. And Felipe's family said that their son had gone camping with his friends. So they had no idea where the couple was. The situation became even more complicated because for several days, no one in the family had been able to contact the couple, and their phones had been turned off. Liana's family reported the incident to the police, who then gradually learned about the couple's route after they left home. Through investigation, the police found the last location where the couple left the bus and moved to a deserted dense forest where their phone was last disconnected in Mbukwashu. A large-scale search began with the participation of the police, rescue workers, and people who knew about the incident who decided to help. A large local businessman also joined the search, using his personal helicopter to search from the air and drop leaflets with pictures of Liana and Felipe. After a short time, the couple's camp was found. However, the atmosphere was very tense because they seemed to have been attacked. There were no signs of blood or fighting, but the couple's personal belongings were thrown around. Their tent had been slashed with a knife from top to bottom. While searching the scene, the rescuers found Felipe's mobile phone. But the most terrifying thing was that they soon discovered Felipe's body. The tied-up man had been shot in the back of the head, at close range. It was clear that the chances of finding Liana alive were slim, but the rescue team and everyone continued to search, hoping that Liana was still alive. Liana's father contacted the press to let everyone know about the incident. A large reward had been announced for any information on Liana's whereabouts, but still no leads. After shooting Felipe dead, the robbers took Liana back to the house where they had previously held them both. Here, the robbers, who had been invited by their accomplices Pernambuco and Chino, joined them. Chino declared that Liana belonged to him, and he could do whatever he wanted with her. He invited everyone to do whatever they wanted with Liana, and his invitation was accepted immediately. The next day, when they learned of the large-scale search operation, the criminals decided to move to another location to cover their tracks. They moved Liana to the house of Anthony Matias de Barros, a member of the gang. That night, the robbers went fishing and Liana went with them. Chino put his coat on Liana because it was cold and he wanted to show her that he cared. To his surprise, Chino's brother also arrived. Chino told his brother that Liana was his lover, and his brother immediately realized that Liana was the one the police were looking for. Chino's brother took Chino aside and warned him that the police were looking for Liana. Chino decided that he had to get rid of Liana. He lied to Liana, telling her that she was free and that he would lead her out into the street. But in reality, Chino led Liana into the woods. There, he brutally murdered Liana with a knife and then smashed her head with a rock to make sure she was dead. Liana's body was found 5 days after the massacre. Liana was wearing the killer's jacket, which later became one of the key pieces of evidence. The robbers managed to flee without destroying the physical evidence. This naive confidence of the robbers helped the police quickly identify them and arrest all the members of the criminal gang. Chino left his jacket on the victim's body, which had traces of his sweat on it. In addition, he took the murder weapon home. He tried to wash the clothes with traces of Liana's blood so that he could continue to wear them. According to the results of DNA analysis, the police identified the members of the gang who tortured Liana. Chino not only did not deny it, but immediately testified, boasting that he had kidnapped, abused, and then killed the unfortunate victim. Chino describes in detail everything that happened to Liana in her final days. After a lengthy trial, most of the adult members of the gang received quite harsh sentences. Pernambuco was sentenced to life in prison for Felipe's murder. Antonio Geno da Silva, as well as Agnaldo Paes, also received life sentences. But Anthony Matias de Barros was sentenced to only 6 years in prison because he himself did not torture Liana but only provided the gang with his house, where everything took place. However, the gang leader, Chino, was only 16 years old at the time of the crime. For this reason, Chino was sent to a specialized juvenile prison with a fairly lenient regime. Chino made several escapes, behaved aggressively, and was unpredictable, so he was assigned to undergo psychological testing. Chino was found to have some mental abnormalities, which had terrible consequences, turning him into a sadist and murderer without any feelings of pity or remorse. After being diagnosed as such, Chino was transferred to a medical facility where he underwent mandatory treatment and rehabilitation. No punishment was imposed on him. Chino has a better life than before his crime. He now has his own room with a large TV, internet access, and a comfortable bed with an orthopedic mattress. He is fed 4 balanced meals a day with a customized menu, which is part of the policy of the medical facility where he is detained. Chino's monthly living expenses are estimated at $1,200, which is about $2,500. In recent years, Chino has regularly applied for release, noting that he has undergone all of his treatment and no longer poses any threat to others, which means he can return to his normal life. The case of Alison Bonilla. Alison Pamela Bonilla Vasquez was born on November 7, 2001, in Cartago, Costa Rica. She is an only child, living with her mother Yendrai Vasquez. In addition to her mother, her grandparents Ramon and Marjorie, and her aunt Samara also helped raise Alison. Alison's father left the family shortly after her birth. He chose to be with another woman who was pregnant. He did not want to play a role in Alison's life. Only once, when he was diagnosed with lung cancer, did he ask to see his daughter, and Yendrai allowed him to. It is worth noting that his second family did not know about Alison's existence. Alison and her mother, Yendrai, had a particularly close relationship. For Alison, Yendrai was not only a mother but also a father. Therefore, Alison often gave her mother gifts on Father's Day. Their relationship went beyond the typical mother-daughter relationship. Alison felt comfortable sharing everything with Yendrai without fear of being misunderstood or judged. Despite not having a father, Alison did not feel lonely or abandoned. She had a large family and enjoyed spending time with them. She also attended church regularly every Sunday. Relatives described Alison as a kind, outgoing, and friendly girl. In photos, she always looked happy, and there was no sign of sadness or longing in her eyes. Alison had always dreamed of becoming a model. She decided to drop out of 8th grade to focus on makeup classes, thinking that combining the two was too difficult. She did not want to waste time on something that would not help her achieve her goals. After that, Alison started looking for a job to help her mother pay the bills but did not receive any responses from the places she applied. This made her very sad. Her mother, Yendrai, realized that her daughter would have difficulty finding a job due to her limited education, so she encouraged Alison to take evening classes. At age 18, Alison enrolled in Liceo Enrique Geyer, a few miles from home. During this time, she completed a pastry course and began practicing. Alison made delicious cakes and desserts that were loved by everyone in the neighborhood. This helped her find a way to make money from her baking talent. Allison had a boyfriend named Harold Sura Solano who lived in Cachi, a district in the province of Cartago, Costa Rica. Usually, Allison stayed home with her mother in the morning, then met Harold, and then went to evening school at 6 o'clock. She often returned home late by bus. The route from the bus stop to her house was dangerous, dark, and deserted. Therefore, Allison always informed her mother of her location, and sometimes her mother picked her up at the bus stop or halfway. On March 4, 2020, Allison went to her mother's nail salon, then visited her classmate Pal for about 15 minutes. They arrived at school at 6 p.m. and separated because they had different classes. Allison arrived at school and waited in an empty classroom for about 15 minutes before realizing that her classes had been canceled for the day. Instead of going home right away, she decided to visit her aunt who lived near the school. However, her aunt was not home. Allison then decided to go to her boyfriend Harold's house. When she arrived, she learned that Harold was at work but would be back soon. Harold's mother invited Allison inside to wait. When Harold returned, the family had dinner together, talking about a variety of topics and discussing future plans. After dinner, Harold excused himself for a moment, saying that he had urgent business to attend to but would be back soon. At 8:15 p.m., Allison left Harold's house without waiting for him to return. This set off a chain of events that would become nationally known. Harold returned home about 5 minutes later and, seeing that Allison had left, texted her to ask where she was and offered to give her a ride home on his bike. Allison replied immediately that she had already arrived at the bus stop. While waiting for the bus, she texted her friend Pa to ask if Pa's cousin could give her a ride home on his bike. However, Pa's cousin refused because his bike was a special type and not suitable for two people. It is unclear why Allison did not ask her boyfriend for help. She may have been angry with him or did not want to bother him. Allison got off the bus at 8:43 p.m. Her house was about a mile away. Feeling anxious and scared, she texted her mother to pick her up. At 8:45 p.m., Allison texted her boyfriend and mother that two suspicious men had gotten out of a car and were following her. She decided to run home to avoid them. The road Allison was on was dangerous, poorly lit, and had few people. There was only one security camera there, which captured a blurry image that could have been Allison. Allison's mother, Yendrai, went to the bridge half a mile from their home to pick up her daughter but did not see her. She tried to stay calm, thinking that Allison might have gone back to the bus stop for safety. However, she did not find her there either. She finally thought that Allison had not seen her and had gone home on her own. When Yendrai returned home, she found that Allison was not there. She immediately called relatives and friends to ask for help in the search. About 30 minutes later, Harold woke up and received a call from his Aunt Samara saying Allison was missing. He tried to contact Yendrai but was unsuccessful. 3 hours later, Yendrai reported Allison missing to the police, and the search began. Luckily, Yendrai had the last photo of Allison in the clothes she was wearing. Police checked several locations, from the bus stop to Allison's house, Cachi Lake, and the nearby hydroelectric dam. On March 5, 2020, police found their first clue, Allison's glasses in the grass about a mile from her house. However, Allison seemed to have disappeared without a trace. 8 days later, they discovered Allison's identification on a coffee plantation. This was surprising because they had checked the area several times before. What was even more suspicious was that her ID was placed in such a conspicuous and clean location. As if someone had intentionally placed it there to mislead the investigation or hide something. 15 days after Allison went missing, Yendrai received a call from Allison's father. Instead of showing concern or offering help, he said that Allison was missing because she was too beautiful. Shocked by these insensitive words, Yendrai immediately hung up the phone, unable to believe what she had just heard. For a long time, the family, police, and volunteers continued to search for Allison. Every Sunday, they hung up posters with her picture. One day, they decided to paint messages on the streets, recreating Allison's journey from the intersection to the bridge, where she was believed to have disappeared. They also put up posters on roadside poles to attract the attention of passers-by. At the same time, the police received an important clue. A man came to the police station and said that he knew Allison and had seen her on the night she disappeared. According to the man, at around 8:30 p.m. on March 4th, he left his home on his motorbike to pick someone up. On the way, he saw Allison and a burgundy two-door BMW parked next to her. He turned around to check on the situation and realized it was his cousin's BMW. He was 100% sure of this because the car had distinctive bright yellow headlights. Another witness also confirmed to the police that he had seen the same BMW near where Allison went missing that evening. The car belonged to Nelson Sanchez Urania, 28, nicknamed Sukia. Locals called him that because they believed he was a member of a gang in the area. In fact, Nelson and Allison knew each other. Their families had been acquainted for a long time and had lived in the same neighborhood for a while. However, according to Allison's mother, they had only interacted with Nelson a few times. It was just a normal neighborly relationship, not a close friendship. One day, Nelson offered to give Allison and her cousins a ride home. She agreed because it was morning, she was not alone. And she thought Nelson was a good person. On March 2nd, 2020, 2 days before Allison went missing, Nelson contacted her via Facebook. He sent a message asking Allison to answer some questions. On her cousin's advice, Allison agreed to answer them. Next, Nelson asked Allison about her feelings for him. Specifically, he wanted to know if Allison liked him. Allison was confused by Nelson's sudden question, as they were not close and barely knew each other. When Allison asked why, Nelson explained that he did not have a negative opinion of her, but wanted to know if she thought badly of him. Allison reassured Nelson that she did not hate him and that everything was normal between them. Nelson thanked her and said goodbye. Police searched Nelson's home and seized his car, cell phone, and computer. Investigators found shocking images of women being abused on his phone. When they inspected the car, they found that it had been thoroughly cleaned with car polish. However, the front driver's seat carpet and trunk carpet had been removed. Police found hair and blood on the trunk lid and sent samples to a lab for analysis. After examining the exterior of the car, police used a police dog to search for traces. The dog detected possible blood on the 2 front seats and in the trunk. To confirm, the police used a luminol test, a chemical that reacts with hemoglobin in the blood. The results showed that there were many blood stains on the car's interior, despite the owner's efforts to remove them with cleaning products. While waiting for the results from the lab, Nelson remained free but was closely monitored by the police. They monitored his every move to prevent him from leaving the city or the country. Although Yendrai repeatedly requested his arrest, the police did not have enough evidence to do so. Therefore, Nelson continued to live freely without being prosecuted for many months. Yendrai believed that Allison had been kidnapped for ransom. She tried to stay calm and hoped that her daughter was still alive. In preparation for Allison's return, Yendrai kept her daughter's room as it was, not cleaning or rearranging the furniture. She even bought Allison a gift. Yendrai told the press, "I will continue to do so. As long as there is no evidence that she is dead, I still believe that my daughter is alive and will return home." Laboratory test results confirmed that the hair and blood found in Nelson's car belonged to Allison. The police immediately arrested Nelson. Later, his ex-girlfriend told the police that Nelson had never physically abused her but had put a lot of mental pressure on their relationship. Specifically, He forbade her from contacting her friends and using the internet. According to her, Nelson only wanted to have a sexual relationship with her. His previous boss revealed that he was very irresponsible at work and even stole about $11,000. Additionally, his landlord said an ex-girlfriend had broken up with him because she was tired of paying his debts. She described him as a very spoiled man. After that, Nelson confessed to his crimes against Allison. He said that on the night of Allison's disappearance, he found her walking alone on a deserted road. Taking advantage of the late hour and their acquaintance, Nelson offered to give Allison a ride. She agreed and got into the car without suspicion. However, instead of taking her home, Nelson drove to a remote coffee plantation and forced Allison out of the car. Nelson violently attacked her, knocking off her glasses and leaving her nearly unconscious. He dragged her to a nearby abandoned house, where he raped and brutally beat her. Nelson then tied her hands with cloth and duct tape to the front seat of his car. Finally, he stuffed her into the trunk of the car and drove to a dumpster in San Giorano Cacci. There, the killer pushed Allison off a cliff into a pile of trash below. He justified his heinous actions by saying that he was under the influence of drugs. He also admitted that he had long been obsessed with Allison, and when he saw her that night, he decided it was his chance to carry out his dark intentions. Surprisingly, Nelson later recanted his initial statement, accusing the police of coercing him into confessing. However, the authorities had enough evidence to charge him despite his denials. The suspect could face a maximum sentence of 35 years in prison. In the early morning of September 4th, a search party went to the San Anno landfill to look for Allison's body. However, because the area was large and difficult to access, finding Allison's remains was an extremely difficult task. Moreover, it had been 6 months since Allison went missing. Just 25 days after Allison confessed, the police discovered a number of important pieces of evidence. They found human bone fragments, including a spine, ribs, part of the pelvis, and a femur. They also found pieces of clothing that Allison was wearing on the day she disappeared, along with a pair of sneakers with studs inside. All of these clues were sent for testing and thorough analysis by the police. José Francisco Herrera, the suspect's defense attorney, questioned the authenticity of the evidence because it was found by volunteers, not professional police. He also said that the discovery of the remains coincided with the time his client declared his innocence, which was suspicious. Rodrigo Era, the attorney representing Allison's family, on the other hand, criticized the suspect's change of testimony, saying that it undermined the credibility of the official investigation. On October 5, 2020, experts confirmed that the remains found belonged to Allison. Because only a partial body was found, they were unable to determine the exact cause of death. However, examination of the remains revealed multiple fractures that appeared after death, suggesting she may have fallen from a great height. Her clothes were torn and her sneakers had bite marks, suggesting a possible animal attack. This would explain why the remains were found scattered in different areas of the landfill. Allison's mother, Yendrai, is furious with the police for not listening and acting promptly. She believes that if they had arrested Nelson sooner, he would have confessed and Allison's body would have been found in better condition. This is an irreparable loss for the family. Despite the terrible pain she is enduring, Yendrai finds some solace in saying, "My daughter is in a better place now, where no one can hurt her anymore." The trial of Nelson took place on July 19, 2021. Harold, Allison's boyfriend, was a key witness in the case. According to Harold's testimony, on the afternoon of March 4, 2020, at approximately 6:30 p.m., he returned home and found Allison there with her mother. Harold then left for approximately 5 to 10 minutes. When he returned, he discovered that Allison had left without saying anything. While Allison was on her way home, Harold texted her repeatedly. As soon as she got off the bus, Allison texted Harold to say that two men were following her. Concerned for her safety, Harold suggested that she take a taxi and promised to pay for it. However, Allison refused twice and said that she would run home. Harold did not receive any further response from Allison after that text message. According to his explanation, he only informed his mother of the situation. He did not contact Allison's mother, Yendrai, because his phone battery died. He then fell asleep for about 30 minutes. It was Allison's aunt who called him to inform him that his girlfriend was missing. Since then, he said he has been worried and tried to call Allison several times, but all the calls went to voicemail. He also could not be reached via WhatsApp messages. Harold said he joined the search party for a few days but then had to stop because he felt unwell and had to go to work. He really wished things had gone differently. If he could go back in time, he would have taken Allison home that night. However, unfortunately, what happened cannot be changed. On August 18, 2021, the court sentenced Nelson to 18 years in prison for taking the life of Allison. He could have received twice the sentence, but the judge pointed out that there was no evidence to confirm that Nelson knew the route and time Allison would return home and that he planned to attack her. Furthermore, due to the condition of Allison's remains, there was no evidence that Nelson forced her to have sex. The story does not end there. Allison's family was not satisfied with the original sentence, arguing that it was not commensurate with the crime. In 2022, they successfully appealed, and the court decided to retry the case. As a result, on September 28, 2023, Nelson was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Allison's family's lawyer emphasized that Nelson acted in a cruel and inhumane manner and took advantage of the trust of the victim and her relatives. The court ruled that Nelson's actions were intentional. Nelson used his long-standing relationship with Allison to commit the crime. The criminal court also took into account Nelson's lack of remorse for his actions. Although still hurt and angry, the victim's family was relieved by the new verdict. The decision ended a painful chapter in their lives that lasted more than 3 years and put an end to this nightmare. Allison's family created a memorial at the spot where her body was found. They placed a cross, flowers, and a small altar with a photo of Allison and a statue of the Virgin Mary. Allison's case has caused a stir in Costa Rican media and social media. It has also led to many marches in memory of Allison and other women who have been victims of similar violence. The case of Eva Blanco. Eva Blanco was born on February 17, 1981, in Spain. Her father is Manuel Blanco, and her mother is Olga Puig. In 1997, the Eva family moved to Algete, a small city near Madrid. They chose this place to enjoy a peaceful life, away from the hustle and bustle of the capital. Of the 3 sisters Eva, Rebecca, and Maria, Eva is known as the quietest girl when she is with her close friends and relatives. However, Eva always radiates as a cheerful, trustworthy, and wonderful companion. She is also very active in sports activities, and this passion brings Eva endless joy and happiness. At school, she is admired by many people for her charm and warm, friendly personality. Eva is a good example for her younger sisters and is a responsible girl. She always followed all the rules set by her parents, including the curfew, so that they did not have to worry or be upset. However, on fateful day, things did not go as planned. On the afternoon of April 19th, Eva and her friends were playing tennis, enjoying the carefree moments of youth. They had no idea that this seemingly normal afternoon would soon turn dark and sad. On Saturday evening, as the sun set, they decided to go to a local disco to enjoy their strong friendship and spend time together until late at night. Eva asked her mother for permission to come home later than usual. Olga, seeing that her daughter was always responsible, agreed to let Eva stay until midnight before going home. It was late at night, and the clock struck 11:30. One by one, the group said goodbye to each other and returned home, including Eva. Little did she know that her journey home would lead to dangerous mysteries. Eva and her friend decided to take a shortcut through a vacant lot to get home faster. It was a route she had taken many times before, but fate had other plans for her. At 11:45 p.m., they parted ways, and Eva began walking through the familiar dark vacant lot. As midnight approached, Eva's mother became worried that her daughter had not returned home. She contacted Eva's friends for information, but they said they had broken up and that Eva was supposed to be home by then. This made her even more worried. She decided to alert her husband, a tow truck driver, who soon began searching for Eva in town. They were joined in the search by their nephew, a local police officer, and the father of one of Eva's friends. At 1 a.m., Eva's parents reported their daughter missing to the local civil police station. However, they were disappointed by the lack of interest shown by the police, who took just over an hour to file a missing persons report. The police downplayed the seriousness of the situation, suggesting that children Eva's age were often on drugs and that she might be lying in a doorway or on the sidewalk. This clearly implied that they were not taking the search for her seriously. During the night, Eva's father visited the local civil police station 15 times. He was extremely frustrated and criticized the agency for not quickly organizing a search for Eva. He accused the civil police of neglecting their duties. However, the police denied this and explained that according to normal procedure, they would wait several hours before starting a search for a missing person. Meanwhile, Eva's father was still worried and hoping that his daughter would return safely. However, the real reason behind this delay remains unclear, adding to the uncertainty and despair. The search for Eva began at 2:30 a.m. Family, friends, and authorities searched the town and surrounding area. However, the police did not file a missing persons report until 8 a.m. By noon, Eva's family had contacted local television station Telemadrid, asking them to report on the incident. At 9 a.m., Eva's body was discovered by two elderly people, 6 kilometers from the town of Algete, near a road construction site connecting Cobina and Belvis to Jarama. This area is often chosen by young couples for private rendezvous in their cars. Initially, the discoverers suspected a serious traffic accident, thinking that she had been run over. However, when the police arrived, they discovered a much more horrifying truth. Eva had been brutally murdered, lying face down on the ground with multiple stab wounds. She was wearing jeans, a dark sweater and hiking boots, the same clothes she had worn on the day of her disappearance. A sleeve of her jacket was missing, indicating a violent struggle. Investigators believe both Eva and her killer arrived at the scene by car. However, heavy rain overnight washed away tire tracks and other vital forensic evidence. Despite the difficulties, investigators discovered Eva's faint footprints and a crucial clue, the footprints of a man wearing size 42 moccasins. The findings offered hope for justice for the innocent victim. The Eva family was notified by the police of the discovery of Eva's body. According to the autopsy report, Eva was stabbed 19 times in the back and died of blood loss at around 4 a.m. The weapon was a navacha knife 8 to 10 centimeters long and 1 centimeter wide. Eva's death was a heartbreaking tragedy for the community. The attack began while the victim was still in the car and continued as she tried to escape up the side of the road. The wounds, especially to the ear and the back of the head, showed the brutal nature of the crime. The first wound was severe enough to cause death. Forensic evidence showed that the victim was also sexually assaulted. DNA samples from the same attacker were found on the victim's body and clothes, proving this barbaric crime. The discovery of a red cloth in the victim's mouth was determined to be from a regular car seat cover. This suggests that Eva was taken into the car after being kidnapped. This detail reflects the painful final moments of the innocent victim. However, since the body was found fully clothed and there were no obvious signs of violence, investigators and police initially thought it might have been a consensual sexual encounter that led to a deadly fight. Eva's parents believe that their daughter was kidnapped, raped, and murdered to cover up the evidence. They do not agree with the view that Eva committed suicide. The police expect the case to be solved quickly. They suspect that an acquaintance of Eva's offered to drive her and took her to a secluded place, a popular spot for couples, where the tragedy occurred. Police initially suspected Eva's ex-boyfriend in Fuente El Saz, but he was cleared after questioning. The investigation then focused on men known to Eva's family, specifically people she might have trusted enough to take a ride with. Nevertheless, as the case became more complex, police could not dismiss the possibility that the perpetrator was a complete stranger. But Eva's friends were adamant that she would never take a ride with a stranger and believed that she had been forced into the car. Adding to the mystery, some neighbors linked the incident to an unknown blue car that was seen in town around midnight following another girl. The driver was described as a blonde man in his 20s. Unfortunately, no one recorded the license plate number, leaving a vital clue in the case untraceable. During the investigation, investigators discovered unidentified male bodily fluids on Eva's body and clothing. However, this information was kept secret and not disclosed to Eva's family or the public. Simultaneously, the police secretly collected DNA samples from men who were related to or knew Eva to compare with the DNA found in the fluids. Eva's father's, Manuel, DNA was taken from a cigarette he had smoked while drinking coffee and discussing the case with the police. Other samples were discreetly collected from alcohol tests or from cups used by the suspect in a bar. Although no matches were found, the Civil Defense Police still believe that the perpetrator is an adult male living in Algete or the surrounding areas. The investigation continues while Eva family yearns to find out the truth. 8 months after Eva died in a tragic incident, her mother found 2 secret diaries in her daughter's room. The diaries were dated 1995 to 1996 and 1996 to 1997, in which Eva recorded details of her daily life up until the day she was murdered. Most of the entries revolved around Eva and her ex-boyfriend Miguel. Their names were repeatedly written in different colors of ink throughout the pages. Near the end of the book, Miguel's name was suddenly replaced by the number 343110, while Eva's name remained the same. Despite many attempts to decipher the meaning of this number, no one has found a satisfactory explanation. The true meaning of the number remains a mystery, leaving Eva's family and investigators haunted by this puzzling clue. After Manuel's DNA was ruled out as that of a suspect, he launched a campaign calling on Algete residents to voluntarily provide DNA samples to help with the investigation. With the mayor's support, in November 1999 an official notice was issued asking all males over the age of 16, about 5,000 people, to provide hair or saliva samples. However, Spanish judicial authorities rejected the proposal, considering it naive, inappropriate, and useless. Additionally, it could stigmatize those who refuse to provide DNA, a legal right without a court order. They also believed that the perpetrator would not voluntarily provide his DNA sample. Eva's father collected 2013 DNA samples from residents of Algete and surrounding towns and sent them to the local court for a decision. The judge requested an opinion from the Madrid chief prosecutor on the legality of the testing. On March 30, 2000, Chief Prosecutor stressed that only those suspected in the investigation should be tested, not all volunteers. Consequently, only 45 samples were tested, including 12 from Eva's relatives, acquaintances, and the people with criminal records, especially cases involving sexual crimes and knife violence. Time passed and the case went cold. But the turning point of the case occurred when a woman reported to the authorities that she saw a suspicious man at the construction site around 8 a.m. before Eva's body was found. The man was sloppily dressed, walking in the rain without an umbrella, looking as if he had been up all night, and appeared to be searching for something before getting into a white Renault 18. Police considered her testimony credible, as several other witnesses had also reported seeing the Renault 18 years ago, matching the fibers found on Eva's body. On October 28, 2013, police released a sketch of the suspect, made with the cooperation of a new witness. The man was described in 1997 as being about 35 to 40 years old, 170 to 180 centimeters tall, weighing 75 to 80 kilograms, obese, with short brown hair, a square face and hard features, and deep-set eyes. He was wearing a white shirt, a V-neck sweater, and was driving a white Renault 18 with red upholstery. A secret telephone number and email address were set up to collect information, receiving 100 emails by January 1, 2014. In late 2013, the investigation took a major step forward when DNA from the fluid suggested the suspect was of North African origin. Police asked 300 North African men who had lived in Algiers in 1997 to volunteer their DNA samples. A former neighbor of Eva's, now living in the south of France, had a close match to the killer, suggesting the DNA in question could belong to the neighbor's sibling. Subsequent DNA analysis revealed a man named Ahmed Chel. On October 1, 2015, Ahmed was arrested outside his workplace in Vizel-Sum, France, in a joint operation by the civil police and the French gendarmerie. Ahmed Chel was born on March 1, 1963 in Taza, Morocco. He married a 20-year-old Spanish woman in 1989 in Madrid and became a Spanish citizen in the 1990s. They had one child and Eva was 5 months pregnant when Ahmed's wife was murdered. They were not registered residents in Algiers because they lived in the truck of Ahmed's employer, where he worked as a delivery man, about 4 kilometers from the scene of the crime. In 1999, the Chels moved to France, where they separated amicably but were still listed as married in Spain. In 2003, Ahmed remarried a young Moroccan woman who lived near the Swiss border and had children. He worked as a welder on agricultural machinery but struggled with relationships with his colleagues. When confronted with DNA evidence, Ahmed claimed that 2 unidentified men had taken him to Eva's body and forced him to touch her. However, his ex-wife denied this, telling reporters that Ahmed had actually gone out with his brothers, as they often did on weekends. She revealed that one of the brothers had said he had been at the same club as Eva and had spoken to her after she had a fight with her ex-boyfriend. Eva returned to the club at 11 p.m. with friends instead of her brothers. Ahmed's ex-wife said that she and her brothers had not been questioned by the police. She denied that Ahmed was abusive but admitted he was aggressive when drunk. Female colleagues and clients found Ahmed unapproachable, aggressive when drunk, and unsuitable for women. Eva's family had little contact with Ahmed's brother and had not met Ahmed. On October 5, 2015, Ahmed attempted suicide but failed, after which he agreed to be deported to Spain for trial. At a hearing on October 13th, he remained silent but provided DNA. He was detained until DNA testing confirmed his involvement. In January 2016, the prison psychiatric unit removed Ahmed's anti-suicide measures. Ahmed claimed he had been forced to touch Eva, denied any penetration, but could not explain why his bodily fluids were present in her genital area. On January 29, 2016, Ahmed was found dead in his cell, having committed suicide by hanging himself with his shoelaces. The trial officially ended on February 15, 2016. Eva's family, despite finding their daughter's killer, were disappointed that he was not held accountable for his brutal actions. However, they believe that justice will be served in the afterlife. Eva's story is a journey to find justice after loss. The community unites to find answers for the young girl whose life was taken. The case of Kelsey Turner. Kelsey Turner was born on March 5, 1993, in Norfolk, Virginia, the second child of Samantha Ingram, who aspired to be a model and dancer. Growing up, Kelsey had an older brother named Colin. After her birth, her family moved to Jonesboro, Arkansas, a small industrial town where Kelsey spent most of her childhood. However, her family life was turned upside down when her parents divorced after a few years. After the divorce, her father returned to Virginia. Kelsey grew up into a beautiful young woman with a perfect figure and attractive features that could easily lead to a modeling career. However, she found school unappealing and enjoyed socializing with friends, dating, and attending various social events. Her ultimate ambition was to become famous, appearing on magazine covers, giving interviews, and walking the red carpet at major events. Despite her ambition, Kelsey had no real talent and had to rely on her youth and looks to survive. While in high school, she began attending modeling auditions in hopes of starting a career. Her mother, Samantha, who dreamed of becoming a model, was happy to support her daughter in pursuing her dream. Unfortunately, Kelsey's modeling career was limited to a few small photo shoots for clothing catalogs. Kelsey married Jerry Turner at the age of 18, when she was already pregnant. Their daughter, Beverly, was born shortly after the wedding. However, the marriage did not last long and ended in divorce. By the age of 20, after giving up her modeling career, Kelsey decided to pursue a career as a men's magazine model. She quickly caught the attention of several men's magazines. Kelsey saw this as the beginning of a great career and a ticket to the life she had always dreamed of. Kelsey has received several modeling offers and opportunities over the years, including photo shoots for popular publications such as Playboy and Maxim, as well as a photo shoot with 110 magazine. She frequently travels to major cities such as Los Angeles and Las Vegas to pursue these opportunities. In an interview, Kelsey describes herself as a curvaceous blonde with a slim waist and reflects her carefree personality, saying that she likes to have fun, party with her friends, and live life to the fullest. Kelsey is not overly concerned about the future. She frequently changes partners and quickly spends any money she earns or receives from fans. At 23, Kelsey became pregnant again and gave birth to a son, Josh. The father of the child did not want to marry her or acknowledge his child. As the modeling offers dried up, Kelsey turned to social media to build an audience. She actively manages her accounts, posting revealing photos in swimsuits, lingerie, or only partially covering her private parts. Kelsey has cultivated the perfect online image. Her carefully edited photos make her look beautiful, and her social media pages showcase her visits to high-end fashion stores, trendy nightclubs, and other locations. However, this ideal online image hid the true struggles of a single mother of two. Despite her wealthy appearance, her real life was difficult, as she was a poor money manager, often spending all her income at once. Around 2016, Kelsey faced serious problems after an unfortunate incident with her daughter. The girl suffered a severe trauma that left her daughter withdrawn and unable to speak. An acquaintance advised her to take her daughter to a psychiatrist. So she contacted renowned pediatric psychiatrist Dr. Thomas Burchard, who practiced in Monterey, California, to treat her daughter. Dr. Thomas Burchard is a highly respected pediatric psychiatrist who was born on February 16, 1948, in Boston, Massachusetts. He is the son of a prominent architect and engineer, and his family later moved to Virginia. Although his father taught architecture at prestigious institutions, including Harvard, Thomas chose a different path and pursued a medical career, focusing on child psychology. After completing medical school, Dr. Thomas served as a resident in pediatric psychiatry at several leading hospitals and taught at universities across the country. He eventually settled at a public clinical hospital on California's Monterey Peninsula, where he spent more than 40 years as a pediatric psychiatrist, building an impeccable reputation for his exceptional ability to connect with young patients and handle even the most complex and severe cases. He earned his doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley. Thomas was known for being kind, sharp, and incredibly generous. His compassionate nature motivated him to help those in need, especially young patients whose parents could not afford therapy. He also paid for hospital treatment for sick children from low-income families and supported single mothers. Dr. Thomas had a longtime companion named Di, who served as an assistant, housekeeper, and possibly more. As someone who knew him well, she was the first to notice changes in his behavior that showed early signs of dementia or Alzheimer's. As Dr. Thomas entered his 70s, he became increasingly forgetful, absent-minded, and distracted. To hide these symptoms from his colleagues, he kept detailed diaries and notebooks to record important information, such as names, dates, and events. He always carried a notebook in his breast pocket that contained sensitive information such as bank information, account numbers, passwords, and card pins. When Kelsey first visited Dr. Thomas with her daughter, she expressed her difficulties as a single mother and her inability to afford his services. However, the doctor offered to provide his services for free and went on to give Kelsey $300 to help support her children. Kelsey was shocked but quickly discovered that by sharing tearful stories of her difficult life, she could extort more money from the elderly doctor. Kelsey prepared a detailed plan for her next appointment with Dr. Thomas. During the visit, she told a heartbreaking story about her youngest son's illness and lack of money to buy expensive medicine for him. She gave a specific amount of money that she needed, and surprisingly, she received the entire amount from Dr. Thomas. Kelsey continued to make up false, tearful stories in the following visits. She would make up stories of hardship and receive larger and larger amounts of money from this trustworthy doctor. Of course, she did not use the money for her children, but for her own entertainment, designer clothes. Not wanting to return to her hometown of Virginia, Kelsey asked Thomas to pay for her rent in California, saying that she could find work there more easily and that the climate there was better for her children. Thomas agreed and paid for the apartment she had chosen. Some people suspected that the doctor had an affair with Kelsey, a young blonde model, and that was why he always indulged her requests. However, Kelsey claimed that Thomas treated her and her children like family and acted out of kindness, not love. Thomas provided Kelsey and her children with a home, paid their bills, and gave them a large sum of money for their necessities. He also leased her a luxury Mercedes-Benz convertible. Over time, Kelsey realized that her modeling career was over and her youth was slipping away. Despite this, she made no effort to find another job and instead relied on Dr. Thomas for financial support. During this time, he spent about $500,000 on Kelsey and her children. However, she squandered that money on personal indulgences, such as breast augmentation and liposuction, in hopes of reviving her modeling career. Kelsey's excessive spending and partying lifestyle led to her neglecting her children. This eventually led to her ex-husband, who had won sole custody of their daughter through the courts, stripping Kelsey of her parental rights. As a result, Kelsey was left with only her youngest son. Thomas was furious when he discovered the situation, but his anger was directed at Kelsey, not at her ex-husband. It was clear that Kelsey had neglected her children and was using the money meant for their care to support her lavish lifestyle. Dr. Thomas decided to address the issue with Kelsey, informing her that he would no longer support her lavish and idle lifestyle. However, Kelsey responded by threatening to spread false rumors that Dr. Thomas had inappropriate feelings for his young patients. Although he knew this was a lie, Dr. Thomas realized that any further rumors about the matter could seriously damage his reputation as a respected pediatric psychiatrist and scholar. Faced with this threat, Dr. Burchard reluctantly gave in to Kelsey's demands and continued to support her financially. In 2019, Kelsey moved to Las Vegas with her son to try to revive her modeling career, and she expected Thomas, whom she was blackmailing, to fund the effort. As instructed, Thomas rented a house for her and provided the requested funds. However, after receiving the financial support, Kelsey disappeared for 2 months and her whereabouts were unknown. Later that year, in February, Kelsey reappeared, contacting Thomas in an emotional state, saying that she was seriously ill, unable to work, and in dire financial straits. When Thomas refused to help, Kelsey's attitude changed completely and she continued to threaten and blackmail him. Judy, who was close to Thomas, advised him to report Kelsey's behavior to the police and contact Child Protective Services due to concerns about Kelsey's ability to care for her younger son, especially since she had previously lost parental rights to her older daughter. Dr. Thomas took steps to prepare in case the conflict with Kelsey escalated in court. He informed his colleagues of the situation, and they agreed to support him. Judy had previously attempted to resolve the issue by speaking directly with Kelsey. Unfortunately, her efforts only resulted in Kelsey threatening retaliation. Thomas decided to travel to Las Vegas to verify Kelsey's claims. Judy tried to dissuade Thomas, but he was adamant about traveling to Las Vegas to meet with Kelsey. Judy also offered to accompany him as a friend for support, but Dr. Thomas insisted on handling the matter himself. He finally set off on March 1, 2019. On the morning of March 7th, a group of tourists got lost while traveling through Nevada. While trying to get to Lake Mead, they took a dirt road off the main highway. They came across a Mercedes-Benz convertible parked in the desert. The roof was closed and the windows were rolled up, but unusually, there was no one around the car. Intrigued, the tourists cautiously approached the car and saw that one of the windows was broken. Upon further investigation, they looked inside and saw signs of a struggle. There were blood stains all over the interior. The tourists quickly contacted the police to report their shocking discovery. Police arrived at the scene around noon and discovered an unbearable stench. The source of the smell was quickly identified when police opened the trunk. Inside, they found the body of an elderly man hidden under a pile of furniture and rags. Beside him was a blood-stained baseball bat. The victim was later identified as Dr. Thomas, who had been missing for 5 days. Judy reported Dr. Thomas missing on March 2nd when she was unable to reach him at their scheduled meeting time. She immediately suspected something terrible had happened and contacted the police, hoping he would be found alive. The autopsy revealed numerous serious injuries to Thomas's body. These included scratches, bruises, and superficial cuts, as well as a severe head injury that may have been caused by a baseball bat found in the trunk of the car next to him. Part of his ear was severed, and his hands had multiple cuts that suggested a desperate attempt to defend himself. Thomas's face also had noticeable bruises with a unique printed pattern. Most shocking was the evidence that the man had been placed in the trunk of the car while still alive and injured, eventually suffocating from the intense desert heat. The investigation focused on Kelsey Turner as the prime suspect, as the car at the crime scene had been rented under her name. Judy had provided the police with Kelsey's address, which matched the location Dr. Thomas had visited. However, when the police arrived at the scene, they found the house empty. Although no one was there, the house showed signs of a hasty cleanup. Containers of cleaning products were scattered throughout the house and the air smelled strongly of household chemicals, suggesting that someone had tried to erase any evidence of the crime. The house was occupied by Kelsey, her 4-year-old son, and her new boyfriend, John Logan Kennison, along with 2 neighbors, Diana Pina and Jeremy Eric. All had fled, making them suspects, as Kelsey could not have inflicted such injuries on the doctor or placed his body in the trunk of her car herself. Jeremy Eric was the only person the police interviewed. He explained that he and his girlfriend had left Kelsey's house while the doctor was still alive. According to Jeremy, his girlfriend had been drinking heavily and began flirting with Thomas, trying to extort money from him, similar to Kelsey's tactics. This made Kelsey extremely angry, as she accused Jeremy's girlfriend of trying to steal Thomas from her. The situation became worse, and Jeremy had to quickly move his girlfriend out of the house to avoid a fight. He did not return for several days and was unaware of what had happened after he left. During the investigation, the police learned from Judy that Dr. Thomas kept a notebook with his bank account information and passwords, which he frequently lost. When they searched, they discovered that the notebook was missing. Furthermore, 2 of Dr. Thomas's accounts showed significant withdrawals on March 3rd, after which Thomas's accounts and cards were immediately closed. On March 21st, in Stockton, California, police arrested Kelsey and her boyfriend for attempting to withdraw money again. It was later discovered that the couple had stayed in various motels with a child, paid in cash, and moved frequently. They initially attempted to drain all of Thomas's accounts but were unsuccessful. They then attempted to withdraw more money with the intention of fleeing to Mexico but were prevented by the accounts being closed. Diana, a neighbor who was at Kelsey's home that night, cooperated with police and shared her account of what happened on the night of March 7th. According to her, the trouble began after Jeremy and his girlfriend left. Kelsey had a heated argument with Dr. Thomas, who refused to give her money. Kelsey threatened to ruin the doctor's reputation by spreading rumors about his misconduct with young patients. As the argument escalated, Kelsey became aggressive. Dr. Thomas, feeling threatened, locked himself in his room. However, John broke the door open with a strong shoulder thrust and then hit Thomas hard with a baseball bat. This caused a serious injury, resulting in a large hematoma and a nosebleed. Diana rushed in, pleading with everyone to calm down. Seeing Thomas's condition, she urged them to take him to the hospital, fearing the consequences of their actions. After hearing Thomas say that he would tell the police that he had been attacked and robbed by strangers, the 4 drove to the garage. Diana was ordered by Kelsey to return to the house and clean up, removing all traces of blood. Diana followed the instructions and began cleaning, but soon heard screams and a struggle coming from the garage. She rushed back to find the couple brutally attacking Dr. Thomas in the car. The doctor was trapped and unable to escape or defend himself. It became clear that Kelsey and John had no intention of taking Thomas to the hospital. Instead, they planned to kill him with a baseball bat, a small knife, and John's empty pistol, leaving bruises on the doctor's face. Diana was instructed to return to the house and continue cleaning. Fearing for her safety, she complied and left the garage. While Diana was still cleaning, she heard the couple's car drive away. Several hours later, John's car returned with Kelsey, but the other car, a convertible, was nowhere to be seen. Diana remained unaware of the convertible's location until she heard about a car found in the desert with a body in the trunk. Diana chose to cooperate with the police from the start by agreeing to a plea deal and sharing all relevant information she knew. This decision resulted in a reduced sentence for tampering with evidence, serving just 3 years in prison. John Logan Kennison was convicted of murder and sentenced to 45 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 years. Kelsey Turner's trial was more complicated. After her arrest, she announced that she was pregnant, causing significant delays in the trial. While in custody, she gave birth to a baby girl who, along with her son, was placed under the protection of social services, as none of Kelsey's relatives were willing to take on the responsibility. Kelsey Turner was sentenced to 25 years in prison in January 2023, with the possibility of parole after serving at least 10 years. She is currently serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Correctional Center for Women in Las Vegas. The case of Ryan Widmer. Sarah and Ryan Widmer met at a favorite coffee shop. Ryan ordered a cup of coffee while Sarah was waiting in line, and happened to see a book on his table that she had just finished reading. Their shared interest in literature opened up their first conversation. Gradually, they spent many hours discussing common topics such as books, movies, music, and daily routines. Through the conversation, they discovered that they both loved nature, travel, and animals. After each meeting, their relationship became closer and more trusting of each other. Their understanding and trust grew more and more. Finally, their relationship developed into love. After a few months of dating, Ryan proposed to Sarah at a romantic sunset at the same coffee shop where they met. Sarah felt very happy and agreed to the proposal. The young couple planned their wedding and found a two-story house in Hamilton. Finally, on April 10, 2008, their wedding took place. They chose a small church to hold the wedding ceremony, with the participation of close friends and beloved family. Everything, even the smallest details, was planned by Sarah in a special way. On the important day, Sarah looked gorgeous and beautiful, and Ryan couldn't take his eyes off her. After the wedding and the party, the couple decided to go on a honeymoon to the Hawaiian Islands, where they spent 2 weeks exploring the beautiful paradise and enjoying time together. At this time, they were deeply in love and had already planned for the future, dreaming of having children. On the evening of Monday, August 11, 2008, after finishing work at the dental clinic, Sarah met Ryan at a cafe. They had dinner and talked happily. After that, they walked home. Sarah packed her groceries and sat down on the couch. Ryan brought her a glass of water and a headache pill. He gave her a bath, and they finished watching their favorite TV show together. Sarah went upstairs to the bedroom. She undressed, folded her clothes neatly, prepared a towel, lit a scented candle, and turned on her favorite music. Ryan pressed the button on the TV remote, pausing a few times on the football game. He lay on the couch for no more than 10 minutes. He called his wife, but Sarah didn't hear him, so he slowly went upstairs. In the bedroom, Ryan turned on the TV and called Sarah again. There was silence. In a panic, he went into the bathroom, where he found Sarah lying face down in the bathtub. Ryan unplugged the bathtub and took out his phone to call 911. At 10:49 p.m., under the direction of the police, Ryan finally got Sarah out of the bathtub and performed CPR on her. Within 6 minutes, an ambulance and police were at Ryan's home. An initial inspection of the scene caught the attention of the police. The bathroom was dry and clean, with no signs of water or scattered objects. Sarah was lying on the bedroom floor, naked, her skin dry. Only her wet hair suggested she had drowned. A paramedic performed CPR when there was no pulse. A pinkish-white fluid flowed from Sarah's nose and mouth. 2 attempts to intubate Sarah while she was lying on the bedroom floor were unsuccessful. Sarah was then rushed to the emergency room and 2 more attempts were made to bring her heart rate back to normal with a defibrillator, both unsuccessful. During this time, Ryan remained by his wife's side. Within 20 minutes of arriving at the hospital, they attempted to revive Sarah, but at 11:41 p.m., an emergency room doctor pronounced her dead. Ryan knelt in the hospital hallway and cried. Relatives and friends of the couple could not have imagined that just 4 months after their wedding, a tragedy would strike that would shock the entire city and make Ryan the prime suspect in Sarah's death. When the police questioned him at the hospital, Ryan's initial statements raised suspicions. Ryan claimed that he and his wife had been home that night. They had dined out, returned home, and watched TV. Then, because his wife had a headache, Ryan gave her painkillers and led her to the bathroom. Some details in Ryan's statement did not match the emergency call records. The victim had collapsed face down, while Ryan said his wife was lying face up. This discrepancy made the police question Ryan's statement. Ryan was deeply shocked by what had happened. He kept calling Sarah's name. Under pressure from the police, Ryan was forced to participate in the investigation to find out information about Sarah's death. He agreed to allow his house to be searched. Analysis of the medication Sarah had taken showed that it was a common painkiller commonly used to treat headaches and migraines. However, she had been taking a course of medication that altered her hormones and caused her to fall into an uncontrollable sleep. After searching the house, traces of blood were found on the carpet. During the investigation, the police discovered several signs that made them suspicious of Ryan's story. When they arrived at the scene, the bathtub and tiles were dry with no signs of water. No wet items, clothing, or other items were found in the house that could have soaked up the water. The autopsy revealed that Sarah had several injuries to her body, including bruises to her head, neck, armpits, and lips. However, there were no signs of a struggle or resistance. Sarah's fingernails were intact, not broken or chipped. This does not fit the theory that Sarah was murdered after a struggle. Sarah's autopsy, conducted by Dr. Russell Appointment Grove, showed that she died of drowning. During the autopsy, experts also discovered multiple muscle hemorrhages in the front of her neck and bruises on her head. These injuries were determined to have occurred before her death. However, the cause of these injuries is still unknown. Toxicology tests ruled out the presence of illegal substances or alcohol in Sarah's blood. This makes the question of what caused her death even more difficult to answer. On August 13, 2008, Ryan was arrested on suspicion of murdering his wife. The charge was based on the emergency call, a scene that did not match the reality, and the injuries on Sarah's body. This was enough to charge him with murdering his wife. Ryan and Sarah were very much in love, as friends and neighbors confirmed. They never argued or fought in public and always planned their lives. What caused Sarah's death? In March 2009, the first trial began with emergency line officer Ron Cronenberger taking the stand. He described the phone conversation with Ryan as calm and relaxed. However, Ron Cronenberger also said that Ryan appeared to be just blowing into the tube, pretending to perform CPR. The prosecution argued that the information from the 911 call, the scene, and Sarah's injuries were enough to prove that Ryan killed her by forcing her underwater and drowning her in the bathtub. The main piece of evidence in the case was the bathtub. Police examined the bathtub for fingerprints and found what they believed to be human handprints. These were located closer to the middle of the bathtub. Using a reflective ultraviolet photographic process, fingerprints and stains were found on the bathtub. A fingerprint was found on the forearm and hair follicle. Testing determined that it was left by an adult male, but the age of the fingerprint could not be determined. The police called in a medical expert, who testified that falling asleep and dying in a bathtub was unlikely unless illegal drugs or alcohol were involved. According to the expert, the sensation of water on the face could have awakened the person or triggered a reflex response to the airway. Otherwise, the reduction in oxygen in the muscles would have likely awakened the victim. In addition, the pathologist who performed the autopsy was called to testify. He stated that if Sarah had a dry body and wet hair, a likely explanation would be that her head had been pushed off the edge of the bathtub, toilet, or sink. She could have been pushed forward or backward, in running water or in a full bathtub. According to the prosecution's case, Ryan held Sarah's head underwater until she drowned, and on that basis, he should be convicted. Ryan's defense attorney argued that he was innocent, and that he had no motive to kill Sarah. The attorney said that if there had been a violent struggle, as the prosecution argued, there would have been evidence of that. However, there were no injuries on Ryan, and Sarah's fingernails were not broken or chipped. The attorney said that the injuries found on Sarah were the result of prolonged CPR, direct cardiac massage, and multiple attempts at intubation that night in the house, in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, and at the hospital itself. At the defense's request, a second autopsy was performed. Dr. Werner Spitz performed a second autopsy and again confirmed that the cause of death was drowning. He observed injuries to her neck, arms, upper lip, skull, a lacerated liver, and bleeding from her neck, but could not determine whether these injuries were due to CPR. Those present argued that the paramedics had been trying to resuscitate Sarah for about 45 minutes and that the deep bleeding inside Sarah's neck could have been caused by N4 being inserted into the area because paramedics could not reach the veins in her arms. Instead of ruling it a homicide, Dr. Werner Spitz ruled Sarah's death undetermined. The defense said her skin was dry because it dries faster than her hair. They also said that when Ryan found his wife unconscious, he pushed the drain in the bathtub, tried to help her, and called emergency services. This chain of events explains why her body was drier than expected. The water had drained out of the bathtub even before Ryan called 911. However, it is not yet known whether the jury's verdict would have changed if they had received credible evidence that Sarah's medical condition could have caused the drowning. The official reason for denying a new trial was that the jury had made errors in its investigation. Ryan was surprised when Jennifer Cruz came to the prosecutor's office to testify about Ryan's guilt. She said she was friends with Ryan and that he had been in regular contact with her by phone or email. According to Jennifer's testimony, he called on October 26, 2009, at 11:09 p.m. In a very upset voice, he told her that he had beaten Sarah in the living room on the day of her death. Sarah had discovered his infidelity and had seen inappropriate photos. They had argued for a long time, first downstairs and then in the bedroom. Ryan pushed her into the bathroom and left his wife there without checking to see what had happened to her. He was angry, and after calming down, he found Sarah floating in a bathtub full of water. To cover his tracks, he wiped up the water on the bathroom floor with a towel and came up with a plan for the accident. Ryan's attorneys worked hard to prove his innocence. They tried to throw out Jennifer's testimony because they thought it was unreasonable. One obvious example was that no towels were found in the house, including the dryer. And there was no evidence of infidelity in their marriage. The family had no financial problems and never argued. Ryan was described by friends as a kind and helpful person who never showed anger. Ryan would not benefit from his wife's death because he did not have a life insurance policy. Before the third trial began, Jennifer was discredited and barred from testifying. The call that Ryan allegedly confessed to her was not authenticated. In January 2011, a trial was held based on new evidence. The defense argued that Sarah had underlying medical conditions that could have caused her to suddenly lose consciousness and drown. Several medical experts testified in support of the defense, stating that some heart or neurological defect could have led to the loss of consciousness. However, the state's medical experts disagreed with this assessment. The trial also revealed additional details about Sarah's health and daily routine. Her co-workers testified that she often slept in her car before going to work at the dental office due to severe allergies and stomach aches. On the day of her death, Sarah had complained of headaches and stomach aches to her dentist boss. That evening, Sarah talked to a friend and mentioned her headaches and neck pain, and her friend said she looked extremely tired. Her ability to fall asleep quickly led her friends to think she might have narcolepsy. Narcolepsy is a sleep disorder characterized by excessive daytime sleepiness. People with narcolepsy often have difficulty staying awake and need to take frequent naps to cope. However, Sarah's mother, Ruth Ann Stewart, disputed this idea when she testified as a prosecution witness at trial. She claimed that she had never seen her daughter have sleep problems and described Sarah as a healthy and active child with a regular daily routine. Sarah's medical records also supported this claim. As a dental hygienist, Sarah had undergone regular checkups and her last checkup showed no signs of health problems. In addition, other witnesses who claimed Sarah was excessively sleepy gave unconvincing testimony. In cases where a person tries to strangle another from behind, the victim often suffers defensive injuries to the arms and legs, as well as injuries to the small bones in the neck. However, Sarah's autopsy did not show any such injuries. The defense urged the jury to consider all the facts surrounding the case, that Ryan had no reason to harm Sarah. Once again, the defense was defeated. After about 12 hours of deliberations, Ryan was convicted of murder and sentenced to 15 years in prison. The jury based their decision on the lack of water on Sarah's body and around the bathtub, and that Ryan's call to 911 was staged. One juror felt that Ryan's demeanor in court was one of the main reasons he believed Ryan was guilty. When the autopsy photos were shown, they felt that Ryan was completely unresponsive. Ryan did not take a stand, although he told the court after the verdict was announced, he loved his wife. He did not hurt her. Ryan remains in custody, awaiting a federal court ruling that could determine his parole status. After 14 years in prison, his first chance for parole will be in July 2025. With each passing year, Ryan holds out hope that the next year will bring him freedom. He continues to maintain his innocence and profess his love for Sarah, insisting that he did not harm her. Ryan's chances of parole in 2025 appear slim, as the parole board tends to favor inmates who show remorse. Since Ryan has always maintained his innocence, he could face an uphill battle for parole. The case of Michelle Hadley. Michelle Hadley was born on December 20, 1986, in Upland, California. She is the eldest daughter of a business family and was raised in a strict, conservative family. Michelle grew up with a younger sister and had a close relationship with her parents. During her school years, Michelle led a relatively normal life. Michelle's friends describe her as polite and kind, with a straightforward personality who always says what she thinks. Whenever there are disagreements, she tries to resolve them. Michelle was diligent from a young age, consistently completing her tasks and responsibilities. During her high school years, she was in a long-term relationship with a boyfriend. The couple were together for many years and finally decided to get married in 2008. However, she soon discovered that marriage did not bring her the happiness she had hoped for. After 4 years, the couple's relationship began to deteriorate, and they eventually decided to divorce. In 2013, Michelle's life took a turn for the better when she met Ian Diaz, who was 9 years her. For Michelle, the relationship felt like destiny. Ian was a U.S. Marshal, and Michelle worked in marketing. Initially seemed well suited to each other. The two met through an online dating site, and after a whirlwind romance, they decided to move in together by the fall of 2014. Ian proposed to Michelle, and they started making wedding plans. Initially, their marriage seemed perfect. However, Ian's true nature slowly began to emerge. At first, Michelle didn't notice the changes in Ian's behavior and attributed his actions to caring personality. As time went on, Ian's personality changed for the worse. He became more destructive to himself and emotionally hurtful to Michelle, causing her to be shocked, devastated, and extremely confused. Michelle came from a conservative family, and Ian would sometimes ask her to wear revealing clothes that made her feel uncomfortable. Despite her reservations, Michelle went along with her husband's requests, thinking he was just trying to spice up their relationship. However, Ian noticed that she gave in easily and began making even more daring requests. Eventually, Ian asked Michelle to get her belly button pierced, a request she was initially hesitant about, but ultimately agreed to. However, Ian increasingly pushed the limits. His requests began to become more and more strange. He asked Michelle to quit her marketing job and work at Disneyland, a place he loved and had previously worked at as a deputy U.S. Marshal. Perhaps Ian wanted to keep an eye on his wife, and working somewhere where he still had a relationship made sense to him. Ian justified his suggestion by saying he wanted Michelle to be safer, but in reality, he was seeking greater control over her life. Initially, Michelle found the request peculiar, but driven by her love for her husband and her desire to please she agreed. However, as time passed, Michelle began to feel uneasy about the arrangement. She found herself becoming a different person, one that she no longer recognized. She then confided in her husband. But instead of listening to her, he became angry and violent. Afterward, Michelle and Ian decided to purchase a condominium together, hoping that owning a home would strengthen their bond. This decision was made about 2 years after they first met. The couple began their search for a condo in 2015 and eventually found one they liked in downtown Anaheim, although it was slightly more expensive than they had budgeted for, at $470,000. At the time of the purchase, Michelle had no idea that Ian didn't plan to contribute to the mortgage payments. When the first payment was due, Ian claimed he was experiencing financial difficulties, but he assured Michelle that he would pay the next month's installment. She proceeded with the $144,000 down payment. She handled the paperwork and finalized the purchase, thinking everything was in order. However, in retrospect, it was clear that their relationship was already deteriorating. The situation worsened after they bought the condo. Although the deed had both of their names on it, it became evident that Ian wanted the condo for himself, while Michelle was the only one shouldering the mortgage payments. One summer evening in 2015, Michelle and Ian got into a violent altercation in the car. Ian physically attacked Michelle, causing minor injuries. In the aftermath, Michelle composed a distressing email to her sister detailing the events, but unfortunately never sent it. As the summer drew to a close, nearly 2 months after purchasing their condo, Michelle decided to leave Ian and move in with her parents. Despite no longer living in the condo, Michelle was still responsible for paying the mortgage. This decision would later become a contentious issue in their relationship. In fact, Ian continued to skip the mortgage payments, infuriating Michelle. Around this time, Michelle had stepped down from her high-paying job and was working at Disneyland, a position she disliked. Furthermore, her new job paid significantly less than her previous one. In an attempt to address the mortgage issue amicably, Michelle reached out to Ian via email, phone calls, and texts. However, he deliberately ignored her messages, which escalated the situation. The tension between them reached a boiling point, prompting Michelle to confront Ian in person. Ian's answer was shocking. He never planned to pay the mortgage, which made Michelle furious. Michelle found herself in a difficult situation and decided to take action. She emailed Ian, warning him that his behavior would have serious consequences if he continued. However, this email only made Ian angrier, and he responded by filing a restraining order against Michelle. The police did not fully support Ian's request, as they determined he shared some blame in the matter. When Michelle discovered Ian's request to obtain a restraining order, she countered by pointing out his failure to pay the mortgage on their jointly owned condominium. To resolve the issue, they agreed to hire property lawyers and eventually came to a settlement. The court ruling ultimately favored Michelle, ordering Ian to pay the outstanding mortgage balance. If Ian failed to comply, he would face an additional penalty. Although the ruling was unfavorable for Ian, he had no choice but to abide by the court's decision. This situation dragged on for a year, and by 2016, Michelle and Ian had officially separated. This marked a new beginning for Michelle, freeing her from a toxic relationship. In contrast, Ian remained bitter about the outcome, continuing to live in the condo and pay the mortgage. Ian's life had become increasingly complicated due to the condo situation, so he decided to start using dating apps again to try to move on. This was how he met Angela Connell, a woman he thought was perfect for him. Angela was born in 1985 in Phoenix, Arizona. She attended a Catholic high school and later graduated from Arizona State University in 2006. Ian and Angela met in January 2016. And they immediately have feelings for each other. Their relationship progressed quickly. Ian proposed within a month, and soon Angela moved into his condo. It seemed as if they were meant to be together. By May 2016, Angela announced she was expecting twins, which made Ian incredibly happy. However, their happiness was short-lived when Angela received an threatening anonymous email saying she was not the right person for Ian. Angela was taken aback by the message and initially suspected it might be from her ex-boyfriend, Jason Rayburn, with whom she had a tumultuous relationship before marrying Ian. However, something didn't add up. She had cut off all contact with Jason after their breakup, so he doesn't know about her new relationship with Ian. It wasn't until Ian brought up the topic of the condo, which was purchased by his ex, Michelle, that Angela realized Michelle might be the one sending the messages. As time passed, Angela received more emails from different accounts. The emails all contained similar information but were worded differently. Intrigued, Angela responded to one of the messages, asking the sender to reveal their identity. To her surprise, the sender claimed to be Michelle Hadley. Angela demanded that Michelle stop contacting her, but the emails continued. The tone of the subsequent emails escalated, leaving Angela feeling threatened and fearful for her life. Afterward, she decided not to take any chances and sought a restraining order against Michelle. The incident took place on June 1, 2016. Angela stated to the police that an email from Michelle had left her feeling fearful and anxious. She expressed concern about leaving her home due to the threatening content of the emails, and she feared being attacked or killed if did so. In response to the severity of the situation, the court granted a restraining order against Michelle. A short time later, in June 2016, Michelle seemed to have moved past the troubles of her previous relationship. One evening, after meeting a friend, she returned home to find a team of police officers waiting for her in her driveway. Michelle was taken aback but cooperated peacefully with the officers and was taken in for questioning regarding a restraining charge. During the interrogation, Michelle denied knowing Angela or sending the threatening emails mentioned by the officers. She claimed she was being framed, citing 2 alerts she received a week earlier. The first was from Google, stating her email account had been shut down. The second was from Microsoft, stating her primary email was being used as a recovery email for multiple unknown email addresses. Michelle reported this suspicious activity to the Anaheim Police Department, suspecting her ex-husband of impersonating her. However, her concerns were dismissed by the police, who believed Michelle was lying. As a result, a restraining order was issued against Michelle, but she was unaware that this was just the start of a more complex situation. Things took a dark turn after Michelle was served with a restraining order. However, things became more intense. Angela soon receiving emails responding to a Craigslist ad that she hadn't posted herself. The disturbing ads described a sexual coercion fantasy and included intimate details about Angela's life. The emails contained her phone number, condo address, and even the breed of her dog. It was clear that someone had created an account in her name, but what was particularly unsettling was how they had access to such precise information. Ian and Michelle were the only ones who knew Angela's condo address. She suspected Michelle, but thought that was unlikely. Fear had taken over her so much that she didn't even want to leave her house. The thought of someone knowing her address and watching her all the time made her extremely uneasy. Not knowing who was behind it made her feel even more scared. On June 24, 2016, just days after posting the Craigslist ad, Angela was attacked, and her life was put in danger. Bruises covered her neck, her clothes were torn, and she had a severe head injury from being slammed into a wall. Despite her condition, Angela quickly called 911. When the police arrived, they questioned her about the assault, and Angela revealed that Michelle was her attacker. This time, the police decided to take stronger action against Michelle. They believed that a restraining order would not be enough to protect Angela, and they made the decision to arrest Michelle. While Michelle was in jail, she managed to contact her parents, who are conservative. Her parents were determined to handle the situation discreetly. They posted Michelle's bail of $10,000, made possible by their financial stability as successful business owners. Angela started receiving harassing emails after the incidents. Interestingly, the emails she received came from Michelle's personal email address. However, it's unclear if Michelle actually sent them. On July 13th, Angela contacted 911 because she saw a strange man outside her condo. When the police arrived, the man claimed he was responding to a Craigslist ad posted under Angela's name that featured explicit content. Further investigation led the police to discover that the ad was created from an account linked to Michelle. This raised questions about Michelle's potential involvement and whether she may have provided false information to the police. On the other hand, it's possible that someone was using Michelle's name to mislead the authorities. The next day, on July 14th, Michelle was arrested again, with bail set at $1 million, an amount her parents couldn't afford to pay. Michelle strongly denied sending the emails and creating the Craigslist ads. Her parents believed her because they knew she wouldn't send threats to anyone. Concerned about the potential consequences, Michelle's parents hired a lawyer, thinking that the person behind the threats could continue to get their daughter arrested. While Michelle was in jail for the second time, the threats and emails aimed at Angela stopped again. For 3 months, everything seemed calm for Angela. Meanwhile, Michelle's parents were trying to figure out who was impersonating their daughter. They gathered their daughter's records, including school and hospital records, to see if they could find any weaknesses in the case against her. This led them to find important evidence. Michelle was in the hospital on the same day the first emails were sent, making it impossible for her to have sent them herself. Michelle's parents were given new hope when they received an update about her situation. They had been trying to track down the source of the emails they were receiving, which had encrypted IP addresses. To do this, Michelle's father downloaded various software programs to help identify the senders. Then, in a surprising turn of events, her parents received a phone call with some unexpected news: Michelle's bail had been posted. The surprising twist was that the person who posted the $1 million bail was Ian, the same person who had been treating Michelle badly. This took place on September 30th, 2016, when Ian presented the police with the bail money. Michelle and her family were stunned by this development and couldn't understand why Ian would do such a thing. They had many unanswered questions about his motives. Was he trying to make amends for his past behavior, or was there another reason behind his actions? After Michelle's release on bail, she and her family sought answers. Ian then revealed shocking information, claiming Angela had framed Michelle for sending threatening emails. Angela allegedly used fake email accounts in Michelle's name to send the emails to herself. Angela also posted ads on Craigslist, making it seem like Michelle was responsible. The details in the ads could only have been known by Ian and Angela. Further investigation revealed that Angela's bruises found on June 24, 2016, were self-inflicted. Ian discovered CCTV footage that supported this claim. Ian also uncovered Angela's history of deception. She had been lying since the day they met, and one notable example was her fake pregnancy. Ian found evidence that Angela had bought a fake sonogram of twins on Etsy for $7.50 and a positive pregnancy test kit to support her fabricated story. Angela's motivation to ruin Michelle's life stems from her meeting with Ian in 2015. Ian frequently discussed Michelle and an incident involving a condo. This sparked Angela's curiosity, prompting her to investigate Michelle's past. She discovered that Michelle came from a wealthy background, which led Angela to view her as an opportunity for personal gain. Ian, who was married to Michelle at the time, sought revenge due to a past dispute over the condo's mortgage. The incident had left him feeling bitter, and he was furious about being forced to pay the mortgage following Michelle's countersuit. Together, Angela and Ian devised a plan to bring Michelle down. Ian shared Michelle's email address with Angela, and they began plotting to frame her and have her arrested. In an effort to conceal their scheme, Angela and Ian created separate email addresses to communicate with each other. They also opened 6 fake email accounts in Michelle's name using virtual private networks, VPNs. This is the reason Michelle noticed Google alerts about email addresses in her name that she had not created. Unbeknownst to Michelle, Angela was behind these suspicious activities. When Michelle got a restraining order against, she still felt it wasn't enough because she wanted Michelle gone forever. Angela devised a plan to escalate the situation further. She created a fake Craigslist profile in Michelle's name, posting an ad that invited men to engage in a sex act at Michelle's home. However, the flaws in the plan led to Ian, Angela's husband, confessing the truth. Once the truth came to light, the police secured a search warrant for Angela's devices. To their amazement, when they checked Angela's belongings, they discovered that everything Ian said was true. A total of 21 threatening emails were discovered, with most being sent from Angela and Ian's residence. Further investigation of the emails revealed that some were sent from Arizona. It was ultimately discovered that Angela had visited her father in Arizona during the same period the emails were sent. After discovering these shocking evidence, investigators decided to look into Angela's past. They soon found that she had committed similar crimes before. In 2013, Angela had faked her identity in a serious illness while dating Jason Rayburn, a California state trooper. Angela claimed to be an attorney and said she had cervical cancer. However, her story didn't add up, and Jason became suspicious. He dug deeper and made a disturbing discovery. Angela had lied about having cancer and being a lawyer. This ended her relationship with Jason. The deception wasn't made public until 2019, nearly 3 years later. On January 6, 2019, Angela was detained. She pleaded guilty to 10 felonies, including perjury and false imprisonment. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison. The Orange County District Attorney's Office quickly cleared Michelle's name of the wrongful charges. 3 days later, Michelle's assault and threatening charges were officially dropped. This marked the end of a long and painful ordeal for Michelle. Although the ordeal has ended, Michelle still bears the scars of her wrongful conviction, including the time she spent in jail. She had to give up her MBA classes and lost her job after being wrongfully arrested. After the charges were cleared, Michelle's life began to improve. She earned her MBA and got a good job in marketing at a cosmetics company. She then moved to New York to live with her sister, and her life was better than ever. Ian, on the other hand, separated from Angela and sold their condo for $500,000. However, in 2021, Ian's life took a turn for the worse. He was arrested and charged with planning, carrying out the plot to frame Michelle. As a result, he received a 5-year prison sentence and was convicted of perjury. The case of Michaela Garrett. Sharon Murch and her husband, Rod Garrett, had been trying to have a child for 5 years. After numerous visits to doctors and fertility treatments, they were overjoyed when their daughter Michaela Garrett was born on January 24, 1979, in Oakland, California. Her parents affectionately referred to her as their miracle child due to the difficulties they faced in conceiving her. After that, their family soon welcomed 2 new members, a daughter named Libby and a son named Alex. In 1986, the family relocated to Hayward, where they settled down, established their home, and raised their children. As a child, Michaela was known for being intelligent, lively, and well-behaved. She listened attentively to her parents and followed their advice closely. Sharon was a caring and attentive mother, sometimes it makes others feel like she's being overprotective of her children. Given the rise in child abductions in California during the 1980s, her caution was understandable. As a result, she always kept her children close to home and ensured they were never far from adult supervision. On Saturday, November 19, 1988, Michaela finished breakfast with her family. Her best friend, 9-year-old Katrina Rodriguez, stopped by to ask if Michaela could accompany her to the local grocery store to buy snacks. Initially, Sharon, Michaela's mother, refused permission. However, Michaela persisted, assuring her mother that they would be safe and return quickly. Eventually, Sharon relented and gave her permission to go with you. As a precaution, Sharon reminded they to be careful. She gave Michaela $5, then the girls eagerly grabbed their scooters and left. Before leaving, Michaela expressed her love for her mother. As Sharon watched them leave, her husband Rod decided to go outside and work on the car. Meanwhile, Sharon headed back inside to clean up the breakfast dishes. Unbeknownst to her, the next few minutes would alter her life forever. Michaela and Katrina eagerly rode their scooters to the Rainbow Market on Mission Boulevard and parked them right outside the store. The girls then entered the market to buy some snacks. They purchased 2 Mountain Dew sodas, 2 beef jerky sticks, and 2 cherry toffees before exiting the store. Engrossed in a conversation about their holiday plans, they completely forgot about their scooters. As they were about to leave the parking lot, they suddenly remembered their scooters were still outside. To their surprise, the scooters was missing. The girls decided to split up and search for it. Michaela spotted the scooter first. It had been moved about 3 parking spaces away and was now standing beside a car. Without hesitation, Michaela rushed over to the scooter and bent down to grab the handlebars. In a rapid and unexpected turn of events, a man leapt from the car and grabbed Michaela around her waist. He then forcefully pushed her into the back seat. Witnessing the shocking scene unfold, Katrina momentarily froze, her eyes fixed on the chaotic scene as her friend struggled to break free from the abductor's grasp. The car sped away from the parking space, accelerating down Mission Boulevard toward Union City. Regaining her composure, Katrina rushed back into the store and alerted the cashier, Rona Ranilan, about the kidnapping. Rona quickly called the local police, and they were quickly present at the crime scene. Additionally, Rona also contacted Katrina's father and told them what had just happened to their daughter. Sharon was doing the dishes at home when she heard a frantic shout from outside. Her husband, Rod, burst through the front door, telling her that Michaela had just been kidnapped outside the Rainbow Market. Along with Katrina's father, they rushed to the store and found police everywhere, questioning customers and staff. Katrina was extremely upset and was allowed to go home with her father. Rod and Sharon stayed behind, hoping to get some information about what had happened. However, as Sharon waited anxiously, she couldn't shake off a growing sense of fear. Sharon recalled a poem written by Michaela. She also remembered an incident from the week before that had left her unsettled. Specifically, Sharon had woken up early one morning to find Michaela sitting at the breakfast table, writing in the early hours. Michaela's mother asked her what she was working on, and Michaela vaguely replied that she was writing a poem. Sharon asking repeatedly what the poem was about. Michaela finally explained that her poem was inspired by the noises she had heard coming from the attic that morning. She had been thinking about people who were kidnapped and being held captive, and her poem was about their experiences. She explained that the poem actually referred to individuals who were being detained against their will, rather than those who had been kidnapped and murdered. Sharon found Michaela's poem to be disturbing and out of character, as her daughter was typically a happy person. In hindsight, Sharon believes that Michaela may have written the poem as a kind of prophecy or premonition. The police were provided with a description of the man who allegedly kidnapped Michaela. Rona, a cashier, told them that the suspect was a white male in his 30s with a mustache. She also reported that he drove a car that was either burgundy or maroon in color, but was unable to provide details about the make or model. According to Rona, the man had parked his car and gotten out, but instead of entering the store, he looked through the window, observing the girls and other customers without entering. She suspected he might be planning to rob the store. A sketch artist created a composite picture, then distributed to local police stations and news outlets. The investigators found the scooter used in the abduction and collected it as evidence. They obtained a handprint from the scooter handle, which was added to their database to identify the kidnapper. But it did not lead to any leads. The day after the kidnapping, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, joined the investigation, they suspecting a relevance between a series of local child kidnappings, but this was ultimately not confirmed. Police soon realized that Katrina could provide more information about the suspect since she was the main witness to the abduction. 2 days after the incident, investigators visited her home. They spoke with her and her parents, and the information she provided shocked them. Her description of the kidnapper greatly differed from the one provided by the store cashier. Katrina described him as a young white male in his early 20s with dirty blonde hair, severe acne scarring, and blue eyes. Katrina vividly recalled the suspect's eyes, describing them to investigators as fox eyes. She explained that despite his look straight at her, but he didn't seem to recognize her. Additionally, she told investigators that the suspect's car was beige or tan in color, box-shaped, and had noticeable body damage. The new description raises concerns as it means the crucial 48 hours to find a suspect has been wasted on finding the wrong person. Investigators reprinted posters with the new suspect's description and redistributed them throughout the area. Armed with this fresh information, they began visiting local sex offenders, inquiring about potential leads. A large number of volunteers joined, going door to door and distributing posters that detailed Michaela's clothing: a white Metro t-shirt, rolled up blue denim jeans, black Mary Jane shoes, and pearl-colored feather-shaped earrings. After searching the nearby suburbs but finding no sign of Michaela, police expanded their search, include the Garin National Park and Niles Canyon, which are just a short distance from the She home. This decision was prompted by a tip from 3 hikers who claimed to have found footprints in the forest area belonging to 1 adult and 1 child. Upon following the tracks, the hikers discovered a blanket and empty fast food containers. A psychological analysis of the kidnapper suggested they would likely take Michaela to a secluded location. To aid in the search, helicopters were equipped with infrared thermal cameras to detect heat signatures in the dense wooded areas. Police officers also combed the area on horseback and on foot, but these efforts did not produce any results. Unfortunately, Michaela and her kidnapper seemed to have vanished without a trace. The search for Michaela made national headlines, and her case was featured on prominent television programs such as Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted. Her photo was also distributed on milk cartons, and the Missing Children's program sent over 50 million mailing cards to homes across the country. These cards included a picture of Michaela, a description of her clothing, and a composite sketch of the kidnapper. San Francisco 49ers quarterback Joe Montana publicly showed his support for the Michaela family and urged the public to come forward with any information. A $70,000 reward was offered for any information related to Michaela's disappearance. Within the first year, the police received over 5,000 tips, the majority of which were unfounded rumors. Despite this, the community remained dedicated to finding Michaela. Sharon conducted her own investigation and found some clues, some taking her as far as Russia, but none produced any results. A significant break in the case occurred between 1991 and 1992, when an inmate in Indiana provided authorities with crucial information regarding Michaela's disappearance. Roger Haggard, who was serving an 11-year sentence for burglary, claimed to have helped a friend bury Michaela's body in a gladiolus field in Union City. At first, the investigators were skeptical and did not think his claims were credible enough to be investigated further. Undeterred, Roger decided to reach out to the media for help. In 1992, he wrote a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, stating that he knew who had kidnapped Michaela and where her body was buried. He offered to lead investigators to the location. 10 investigators brought Roger to California to testify before a grand jury. Roger repeated his earlier claims under oath, promised to lead investigators to Michaela's burial site and the home of her killer. The next day, a team of investigators accompanied Roger to the field where he claimed Michaela's body was buried. After 8 hours of searching, Roger confessed that his claim was false. He explained that his intention was to provide the Michaela family a sense of peace after all these years. This confession had even more serious consequences for Roger. He was charged with perjury and received an additional 6 years prison sentence, along with an order to pay $6,000 in damages to Michaela's family for giving them false hope. This development would not be the only one to shake the investigation. Authorities also kept an eye on another individual, Lawrence Binder, 43, a wastewater treatment plant worker. He appeared to be a normal man, married with a family. However, suspicions were raised when investigators received a tip from East Bay Area parents about his disturbing behavior. These parents claimed that he had been sending gifts and money to young girls in an attempt to befriend them. What's more, some of the letters he wrote were written in reverse, requiring the recipient to use a mirror to decipher their meaning. As investigators dug deeper into Lawrence's past, they found that he drove a distinctive light blue van with the license plate, "Love You." The interior of the van was peculiarly decorated with photos of small children, children's drawings, and biblical verses. Furthermore, Lawrence had a previous arrest record for attempting to lure 2 young girls into his van, although the charges were eventually dropped. Lawrence often inserted himself into investigations of missing children. For instance, following the 1988 disappearance of Michaela, he reached out to her mother, Sharon. He also contacted Kim Schwartz, the mother of 7-year-old Amber Schwartz, who went missing in June 1988. In both cases, the mothers eventually told the police that they felt uneasy about Lawrence's persistence in contacting them and trying to stay updated on the developments in their daughters' cases. After uncovering a series of unusual circumstances, the investigation led authorities to suspect Lawrence of being involved in a series of child abductions. When Amber went missing, Lawrence wrote to the police predicting the next victim would be a 9-year-old girl. This proved true when Michaela missing. Lawrence further raised suspicions when he's sending a Christmas card with a picture of a girl holding up 4 fingers to an FBI profiler. This incident took on a more ominous tone when 4-year-old Amanda Campbell went missing on December 27, 1991. Lawrence was also linked to the disappearance of Eileen Mischelhoff, a 13-year-old girl from Dublin, California. As Lawrence's name became associated with the string of child abductions, he found himself under intense media scrutiny. His unusual behavior and fascination with the cases sparked widespread public interest, leading many people to suspect he was involved. As a result, Lawrence and his family faced harassment and public backlash. However, after Lawrence sued the city of Fairfield for defamation and won, investigators began to reassess his role in the case. It became clear that he was not as involved as initially thought, and many believed he was simply trying to insert himself into the investigation. Despite the mystery surrounding Lawrence, the case remained a complex challenge for investigators. In addition, there is a new suspect, Curtis Dean Anderson. He was arrested in August 2000 and subsequently linked to a series of heinous crimes. After his arrest, Anderson confessed to the 1999 abduction and murder of 7-year-old Ziana Fairchild from Vallejo, California. During a 2007 FBI interview, Anderson made a shocking claim: he had murdered 13 additional women and girls. He also admitted to abducting and killing 7-year-old Amber Swartz, whom he had seen standing on a street corner. However, Curtis's life ended abruptly on December 9, 2007, when he died due to kidney and liver failure. This untimely death prevented investigators from gathering more information about Curtis's past crimes. Following his confession, investigators looked into Curtis's background and found a coincidence. In 1989, he was pulled over in a brown 1977 Chevy sedan, matched the vehicle description given by a witness named Katrina. Despite Curtis's death, his confession reignited interest in a more notorious case, the kidnapping of Michaela. The renewed investigation brought new attention and generated fresh leads. However, a new development in August 2012 shed more light on the case. Wesley Sherman, one half of the notorious Speed Freaks duo, reached out to the Stockton Record after his accomplice, Loren Herzog, took his own life in January that year. Wesley pointed out that Loren was to bear an uncanny resemblance to the suspect's composite in Michaela's case. The resemblance between Loren and the kidnapper is further confirmed by Katrina's observations, which indicate that Loren shares very similar characteristics to Michaela's kidnapper. Following a lead from Wesley, investigators began excavating a well in Linden, California, where him and Loren was believed to have disposed of Michaela's remains. The excavation uncovered thousands of bone fragments, some likely belonging to Michaela. Although investigators never lost hope of solving the case, the mystery continued to baffle them. It wasn't until 8 years later that a useful clue finally emerged. The circumstances surrounding Michaela's disappearance were horrifying and had a profound impact on the public. However, more shocking revelations were yet to come. On December 21, 2020, the Hayward Police Department and FBI made a significant announcement in the Michaela case, revealing a surprising development. Despite initial suspicions focusing on Loren and Wesley, but then investigators charged 61 years old David Garrick with Michaela's kidnapping and murder. Advances in technology played a crucial role in solving the case by linking David's fingerprints to those found on Michaela's scooter 32 years earlier, in 1988. David Misch has been charged with the murder of Michaela and is currently in custody at Santa Rita Jail in Alameda County. An examination of David's past reveals a disturbing pattern of crime that dates back to his teenage years. Born on February 19, 1961, in Chicago, Illinois, little is known about David's upbringing. However, by the age of 16, he had already become involved in criminal activities. In 1977, he was convicted of breaking into a house where he sexually assaulted a maid at knife point. He was arrested and sentenced, but was paroled just a year later, in 1978. David's troubles with the law continued. In February 1979, he was arrested for charges of false imprisonment and assault with a deadly weapon, which were later updated to assault with intent to rape. Despite this, he became eligible for parole in September 1981. Years later, in May 1988, David was arrested for burglary at a San Leandro grocery store. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison and 1 year of probation. In November of the same year, he was released from custody after 6 months. However, his luck eventually ran out in December 1988. That year, a tragic incident happened to his longtime friend Margaret Ball, who was 38 years old. She often helped him in times of need, but the nature of their relationship took a drastic turn. Margaret's dead body was discovered by her stepdaughter in a pool of blood, brutally beaten and stabbed. The crime scene was particularly gruesome, with Margaret's front tooth found a few feet away from her body due to the severity of the beating. The police were led to David as the primary suspect after discovering evidence linking him to the crime. He was arrested and eventually convicted of Margaret's murder. while David was already serving time for Margaret's murder. New evidence led to additional charges against him. In 2018, he was sentenced to 18 years to life for Margaret's murder. A DNA analysis later implicated David in 2 murders that occurred in Fremont, California in 1986. 2 young women, Michelle Xavier, 18, and her best friend, Jennifer Dewey, 20, had gone out to celebrate a family member's birthday dinner on February 2, 1986. After leaving the restaurant, they stopped at a convenience store. However, shortly after midnight, their bodies were found on the side of the road by a motorcyclist. The scene revealed a disturbing and violent crime. The women were stripped naked. They had been stabbed and shot. An autopsy later revealed that they had also been sexually assaulted. The car Michelle was driving was discovered 6 miles away from the crime scene in a grocery store parking lot. Michaela's case was forgotten for many years due to lack of clues and information. However, 32 years later, advances in DNA technology led detectives to a suspect, David Garrick. He is currently serving time, faces additional charges, including 3 counts of murder and 1 count of abduction, which could result in the death penalty. Chief Hayward vowed to continue the search for Michaela's body and remains hopeful that she will be found. Michaela's father, Rod Garrett, traveled over 100 miles to attend a recent press conference. He expressed a sense of relief knowing that the police have caught suspect. The authorities have a suspect to question, and hopefully, this person will provide information about Michaela's whereabouts. Sharon, Michaela's mother, was unable to attend the press conference due to her ongoing battle with metastatic cancer. Police Chief Hayward read a statement on her behalf, which revealed her struggle to accept the reality of her daughter's fate. In the past year, she had to accept the likelihood that Michaela was no longer alive. However, she found comfort in imagining her in a peaceful afterlife, sitting on clouds, walking on golden streets, dancing on hills, and so a ring among the stars. Bernie Castillo, the attorney for David, has been vocal about the case and strongly criticizes the investigation methods used to charge his client. He dismisses the evidence as junk science and finds it implausible that a handprint match was suddenly found after 32 years. Bernie believes the police are trying to pin the blame solely on David as a convenient way to close the case. Meanwhile, Katrina, Michaela's close friend and witness to the case, has been carrying guilt over, still remembers the tragic incident that occurred that Saturday morning. She feels that it should have been her, as the scooter that was moved belonged to her. This burden of guilt has caused Katrina to suppress memories of her childhood. In contrast, Sharon, Michaela's mother, dedicated her life to finding her daughter. Initially, she waited anxiously for news at the telephone and later turned to the internet for answers. However, after David was charged with Michaela's murder, Sharon's fight for justice began to fade due to her cancer diagnosis. She eventually passed away in May 2022, finding solace in the fact that she would soon be reunited with her daughter. A new twist has arisen in the complicated case of David, who is currently awaiting trial for his alleged involvement in the kidnapping and murder of Michaela, as well as the murders of Michelle and Jennifer. The search for justice for Michaela has been going on for decades, but may now face a significant obstacle. It seems David, the suspect, might not face the full severity of the punishment for the allegations against him. In contrast, David's defense attorney, Ernie, viewed the news as validation, stating that each case against David relies on questionable forensic tactics. Bernie was not surprised by the decision, as it confirms his long-held belief that the prosecution's case has significant weaknesses. Others, however, disagree with the decision. Chuck Euler, a retired lieutenant who worked on another case involving David, believed he should receive the maximum sentence for his crimes. David is currently awaiting trial for 3 counts of murder and 1 count of kidnapping. His case is closely tied to the mysterious disappearance of Michaela, a story filled with unexpected twists and turns. However, the investigation was marred by an initial case of mistaken identity, leading police to waste valuable time in the first 2 days. As a result, Michaela's family was left searching for answers for decades. The case of Sabrina Kuder. Sabrina Kuder was born on December 5, 1982, in a suburb of London. She is of French and Algerian descent from her parents. The combination leads to her exceptionalism. The eldest of 4 children, her family moved to Paris when she was 2 years old, and she grew up there. However, Sabrina's complex personality began to emerge when she went to school. Her former classmates described her as fierce, domineering, self-centered. Sabrina does not make friends easily, and she is especially unfriendly to other smart and beautiful girls, as she sees them as competitors. With her beautiful looks and outstanding height, Sabrina could have pursued a modeling career if she had learned to be friendly with others. However, during her childhood and youth, she often wanted to use others instead of caring about their interests. Sabrina participated in sports and music as a child, but she did not strive and did not achieve success in these areas. While studying at school, Sabrina participated in sports and injured her back. Since then, she had to use prescription painkillers. However, she later tried to obtain painkillers illegally, which led to her arrest and warning. Sabrina focused a lot on herself and her appearance, always craving for attention. She believed that she would have a rich, glamorous, and famous future. For a long time, Sabrina's fantasies had kept her from reality. She believed that her rightful place was in Hollywood. Although Sabrina graduated from the Sorbonne with a degree in English and French literature, since 2006 she has changed careers several times in the fashion industry. She has worked as a stylist, makeup artist, and fashion designer, although she has no real expertise in these fields. Sabrina is a young girl with a charming appearance and a hobby of attracting men. However, she only takes advantage of their feelings, never being serious with them. Instead, she is waiting for the perfect man, a prince who will fulfill everything she wants. After graduating, Sabrina has not yet determined her life goals. She feels entitled to enjoy life without having to make an effort. However, she enrolls in the prestigious Sorbonne University and works part-time at a sweet shop to earn money. At the sweet shop, Sabrina meets Wissam Madouni, a man 6 years older than her. Wissam is a manager at the headquarters of a large French company and is studying at a prestigious university. He aspires to get a master's degree to advance in his career. Wissam loves Sabrina very much and is willing to fulfill all her wishes. Sabrina also found Wissam attractive and saw him as someone she could control. Besides, she also saw Wissam as a ticket to a wealthy life. He was ambitious and had the potential to be very successful in his career, willing to pamper and please Sabrina. The couple began their relationship in 2000 and after a few months decided to move in together. However, Sabrina quickly revealed her true nature by controlling Wissam in every aspect of his life. If Wissam did not meet her demands, she would get angry and even beat Wissam. Sabrina also openly cheated on Wissam without hiding or justifying her actions. She had feelings for many people, including Wissam's close friends, colleagues, and random acquaintances. Although Wissam tried to end the relationship and leave her many times, he could not escape his deep love for Sabrina. In 2001, Wissam earned a master's degree and was promoted, earning him a substantial income. However, Wissam spent the money on luxury goods and entertaining Sabrina. Wissam and Sabrina were compatriots of French-Algerian origin. According to some reports, in the fall of 2001, the couple held a special Muslim ceremony to marry, which was certified by it issued by the Argento Mosque. The couple had a son, but years later, another man named Anthony Francois claimed to be the father of the child. In 2008, the global financial crisis hit hard, causing the company where Wissam worked to go bankrupt, and he lost his high-paying job. At this time, Sabrina decided to move to London without discussing it with Wissam. Wissam no longer had any opportunities or hopes for a career here, so he decided to follow Sabrina to London. Upon arriving in London, Wissam found a job at a large bank. However, Sabrina had difficulty finding opportunities in the fashion industry, as she did not have enough skills, experience, and formal education in this field. After that, Sabrina tried many different jobs to find new opportunities. She worked as a nanny, a call center operator, a cafe worker, and even tried her hand at marketing. Sabrina's career journey turned to musician and composer. Despite her best efforts, Sabrina still had difficulty finding opportunities in the music industry. She participated in many auditions and social events to make connections. At one of these events, Sabrina met Mark Walton, a famous musician and composer, who was a member of the famous boy band Boyzone. After leaving the band, Mark became a successful music producer and collaborated with many famous artists such as Jennifer Lopez, Jessica Simpson, and Lady Gaga. In 2016, Mark's net worth exceeded $1 billion. Mark was exactly the person who helped Sabrina enter the world of fame and luxury. She impressed Mark with her beauty and charm. He also had to admit that he fell in love with her at first sight. Their relationship progressed quickly. Sabrina quickly ended her relationship with Wissam. Nothing stands in Sabrina's way. Within weeks, she moved in with Mark in a luxurious house in an upscale area of London. Mark paid all the bills, including rent, for the lavish house Sabrina chose. For months, Sabrina enjoyed the lavish lifestyle she had long desired, socializing with celebrities, attending high society events, wearing high fashion clothes, and even appearing in magazines. However, when Sabrina became jealous of every woman around Mark and could not control her behavior, Sabrina's true colors began to show. Sabrina became increasingly demanding of extravagant gifts. Mark pampered her with designer clothes, jewelry, and trips to upscale restaurants and clubs, but that wasn't enough for her. The couple's home constantly changed maids, as Sabrina's paranoia led her to believe they were stealing or trying to seduce Mark. Her irrational behavior became too much for Mark to handle. In 2011, he ended the relationship and moved to California, leaving Sabrina penniless. After breaking up with Mark, Sabrina began giving interviews and accusing Mark of being severely abusive and having a habit of substance abuse. She called Mark constantly, crying and begging him to come back. She even threatened suicide, but he did not change his mind. After realizing that she couldn't win Mark back, Sabrina contacted Wissam, who was now a bank executive. He still loved Sabrina and was willing to forgive her after a period of separation. They reunited and continued living together. When Sabrina became pregnant with Wissam's child, she again informed Mark and claimed that the pregnancy was his. Mark, through his lawyer, expressed his desire to support Sabrina and the unborn child. He offered to pay the monthly child support. However, Sabrina did not agree to the amount of monthly child support that Mark paid. Sabrina wanted to double the child support and Mark did not agree. Mark wanted a paternity test after the child was born. Because Sabrina refused to take a paternity test, Mark did not change the child support. Sabrina sued him. Sabrina made false statements on social media and accused Mark of jealous behavior, threatening her and Wissam, accusing him of breaking into their home, attacking Wissam, and sexually assaulting her in unacceptable ways. However, Sabrina could not prove any of her claims because Mark had been in the United States since their separation, which proved he was not present at the scene. When Mark filed a lawsuit and the police threatened to take action against her, Sabrina stopped making those accusations. After the conflict seemed to have been resolved, she spent a lot of time in Wimbledon. southwest London, with Wissam and her 2 children. Sabrina's life was difficult with the housework and the care of 2 children, so Sabrina decided to hire a nanny to help with the housework. She posted a job ad online and personally conducted the interviews. Most of the candidates did not meet her requirements, and those who did meet her expectations did not stay long in her family. A young French woman named Sophie Lionnet answered an advertisement for a babysitter. At the time, Sophie was 19 and was back in her home country of France, so the interview was conducted via video call. Sophie agreed to all the terms. Childcare, housekeeping, and cooking for a weekly wage of £50. Sophie was born on January 7, 1996, in the small town of Troyes, between Auxerre and Senators. Her parents, Catherine and Patrick Leon, were laborers, and the family was in dire financial straits. After graduating, Sophie received a degree in childcare, but had no intention of settling down in her hometown. Instead, she longed to move to a big city to develop her career. Although Sophie was quiet, unsociable, and had a plain appearance, she was very kind and open-minded, which made her loved by those who knew her. Sophie's eyesight was poor, forcing her to wear glasses all day. During a conversation, Sabrina quickly realized that Sophie was a simple and inexperienced person, which made Sophie the perfect target for Sabrina to take advantage of. Moreover, Sophie was eager to gain experience, so she was willing to work for minimum wage. Sophie, having told her parents that Sabrina was a serious and trustworthy employer, thought that working for Sabrina's family would be a good start to her nanny career. At first, everything seemed to go smoothly. She took care of the children, did the housework responsibly. This peaceful period lasted for a few months and there seemed to be no serious problems. However, things began to change when Wissam lost his job. At that time, Sabrina's family only had the monthly child support from Mark as their main source of income. So the family faced serious financial difficulties, high rent, and basic living expenses. Sabrina, not wanting to give up her luxurious lifestyle, became irritable and aggressive. She often took her anger out on Sophie, the young nanny. Sabrina and Wissam entered a bakery business with the last of their money, but the venture failed. Sabrina then opened a clothing store but did not have enough funds. She asked Mark for a large sum of money, but was flatly refused, leaving her disappointed. What happened next depends on the source. There are different versions of the story. Some sources claim that Sabrina came up with a plan to use Sophie as a weapon to blackmail Mark. She thought of having Sophie as Mark's accomplice and lover, supposedly planted in Sabrina's home to ruin their lives and endanger the children. Sabrina claimed that the provincial idiot Sophie was in love with Mark. She thought that simply recording Sophie's confession on tape or video and presenting it to the police would be enough evidence to demand compensation from Mark for his cruel actions. However, Sophie refused to lie on camera. Another version, due to her mental disorder, claims that Sabrina actually believed in her conspiracy theory and saw Sophie as an enemy and a threat to her family. She allegedly did not force the nanny to lie, but truly believed that Sophie was Mark's accomplice who had infiltrated their family to harm them. Whatever the truth, Sophie's life soon became a living nightmare. Sophie first faced long hours of overwork and inadequate pay. She ended up working from dawn to dusk, with no time for herself, effectively imprisoned within the walls of the house. Next, her pay was cut off completely. To prevent her from escaping or returning to France, Sabrina took her passport, effectively making her a captive. All her contact with her family was tightly controlled. The situation got worse. Sophie was barely fed and was constantly forced to lie about Mark, whom she had never met or known. Sophie was insulted and threatened, accused of stealing money and valuables. She was threatened with imprisonment if she did not comply with Sabrina's demands. When threats no longer worked, Sabrina resorted to more brutal and sophisticated methods. Sophie was moved to a cold basement, fed only meager food. She became thin and weak. However, the cold and hunger were not the worst. She suffered physical abuse, subjected to the most painful torture. Sabrina broke Sophie's nose in a violent outburst. This division made the story clearer and easier to understand, and made the reader feel more comfortable. However, Sabrina's cruelty continued to increase, causing Sophie to suffer daily torture. The basement of the house, located in an affluent area of London, became a place of torture for Sophie, where she had no hope of being rescued. A strange event occurred in the late summer of 2017, when Sabrina took Sophie to the police to say that Sophie was ready to testify against Mark. However, Sophie remained silent. When the police decided to talk to Sophie privately, they took her to a separate apartment. At this point, Sabrina was extremely worried, afraid that Sophie would reveal the horrors that were happening at their home, which would implicate her and her husband. Mysteriously, Sophie chose not to reveal anything or seek help. The police response was also strange. Despite seeing a young woman who was malnourished, frightened and weak, they did not call a doctor or psychologist to ensure her health and safety. At the time, 21-year-old Sophie weighed less than 40 kilograms, had lost some of her hair, was missing a front tooth and was walking with a noticeable limp. However, none of this worried the police, who simply sent everyone home. By mid-September, Sophie made her final phone call to her mother. She confessed to her that she wanted to return home but did not have enough money. Sophie's mother, Catherine, only telling her that she would buy her a ticket and asking her to pack her things immediately. This was the last time Sophie spoke to her mother. On the evening of September 20th, 2017, something unexpected happened at Sabrina's house. A neighbor called the police about a fire in the yard, but what worried them was not the fire, but an unpleasant smell coming from the fire. The smell was similar to that of burnt flesh and hair, combined with something that could not be identified. This stench spread through the air and stuck to the clothes and skin of everyone around. When the firefighters and police arrived at the scene, they put out the fire. However, the homeowner appeared calm and did not know why the police and fire service had visited their home. The police saw what looked like a charred human hand in the ashes. Sabrina and Wissam were immediately arrested and the badly burned remains were removed from the fire. The sex and age of the deceased were unknown, but the body was soon identified as Sophie Lionnet, identified by the melted metal frame embedded in her skull that Sophie always wore. Determining Sophie's cause of death was difficult. Forensic experts found severe injuries to her body, including multiple broken ribs, a broken jaw, and signs of blunt force trauma to her skull and limbs. This suggests that she suffered these injuries while she was alive. Additionally, some of her teeth were missing and her nose was severely damaged, suggesting that she had been severely beaten. The discovery of horrifying videos of abuse inside the house exposed the brutal nature of Sophie's kidnappers. She had been violently attacked in a variety of ways, including with fists, iron wires, golf clubs, and electric shocks. She had also endured humiliation, including being forced to hold her head in a toilet bowl until she suffocated. Experts believe that Sophie may have died of asphyxiation just before being burned at the stake, which would have spared her the terrible pain of being alive while being burned. During the trial, both Sabrina and Wissam denied guilt and showed no remorse for their brutal actions. After the murder, Wissam went to a nearby supermarket to buy fuel to burn the body and cooked dinner for his family, as if the murder had never happened. The couple's first trial began in March 2018. Sabrina attempted to portray herself as the victim, blaming Mark for driving her into a pathological state with his relentless torture. However, medical tests showed that although Sabrina suffered from a mental disorder, she was not insane and fully understood her actions. Wissam was psychologically dependent on Sabrina despite his physical strength. She had a great influence over him and he would blindly listen to her every word. A former lover of Sabrina spoke out during the trial, describing her as a cunning manipulator rather than a crazy woman. On June 26, 2018, the court found Sabrina Kutter and Wissam Maduni guilty of torturing, insulting, and murdering nanny Sophie. The couple were sentenced to life in prison and must serve at least 30 years before being paroled. However, neither of them pleaded guilty. They repeatedly appealed for a lighter sentence. Sabrina even tried to pretend to be insane for a while to be transferred to a hospital instead of prison. But this plan failed. Mark Walton, who attended the trial, expressed remorse for his past relationship with Sabrina. He said she committed all these barbaric crimes to attract attention and make money from him. Mark sends his deepest condolences to Sophie's parents. The case of Alexandra Morgan. Alexandra Morgan, known as Alexandra to friends and family, is a single mother of 2 children, aged 4 and 11. They live in Wilsley Pound, Cranbrook, Kent. Alexandra has lost contact with the children's father and has had to raise them on her own, which has not been easy. According to some sources, she works as a dog groomer. Alexandra is described as a dynamic and ambitious woman who is always looking after her children. She wants her children to have a better life and has worked hard to achieve it. On November 13, 2021, Alexandra met her parents and left her children in their care. She said she was going on a spa holiday with friends for 3 days. However, by November 17th, Alexandra had not returned to pick up her children as scheduled. Her parents began to worry because they could not contact Alexandra by phone or text, which was very unusual. After several unsuccessful attempts to find their daughter, they decided to report Alexandra missing to the police. Kent police suspect that Alexandra Morgan's disappearance is related to a crime. They began their investigation by looking into the spa where Alexandra said she was going to go with friends. The police also wanted to identify these friends. Start an investigation. Police have obtained video footage from a gas station in Cranbrook where Alexandra was last seen. They are trying to locate her by looking for her white Mini Cooper. On the morning of November 14th, Alexandra went to the gas station to fill up, made a few purchases, and then left. The video shows nothing unusual. Rose McCauley, the petrol station manager who has known Alexandra for 17 years, was there when Alexandra bought £10 worth of petrol, a cup of coffee and a snack on the morning she went missing. Rose said that no one knew what had happened to her or where she had gone. Rose continued that a friend and she had searched all over Hastings, but Alexandra was nowhere to be seen. She said that Alexandra wasn't shy, so she didn't think Alexandra was scared to go home. Rose just hoped nothing bad had happened and that Alexandra would get back safely. It was worrying, she added. When Alexandra arrived that Sunday morning, she was very well dressed, with more makeup than usual, her hair done and some eye-catching clothes. She arrived earlier than usual, looking happy and smiling. Alexandra's friends mentioned that in 2018, she shared on social media about being stalked by a stalker. In 2019, she posted a photo with the caption, "Hello Stalker," and included a message asking the stalker to stop following her page. A police spokesman said that it was unusual for Alexandra to have not contacted her family and that they were treating it as a possible murder. As the investigation continued, they were appealing for anyone who might have seen Alexandra or her white Mini Cooper with a black top to contact them. He added that even if people were not sure what they saw, they should report any suspicious information. Alexandra was described as a woman approximately 168 centimeters tall, of slim build, with shoulder-length brown hair. She was last seen wearing a knee-length green quilted jacket, a black top underneath, ribbed blue jeans, knee-high black boots, and a silver necklace. Usually, when someone goes missing, they don't leave any traces behind to help the police investigate. Many missing cases remain unsolved. However, Alexandra Morgan's case is different. She left behind the last digital traces that helped the police find clues to her fate. Not only that, these traces also revealed some shocking secrets. Further investigation helped the police find out more information about Alexandra. She wanted to improve her finances, so she started working as a call girl and advertised her services online, without telling her family and friends. Women in this profession are among the most vulnerable. Everyone knows that they face risks because it is impossible to know in advance whether the next customer is normal or dangerous. This job is unsafe. According to the investigation, Alexandra had an appointment with a regular customer before she went missing. The police have arrested this man. On November 25, 2021, they arrested a 40-year-old man, Mark Brown, from St. Leonard's-on-Sea on suspicion of murder. Mark Brown, a construction worker who is married with a son. His family were completely unaware of his secret life. Sussex police said that before Alexandra went missing, she had met Mark several times, and he had even bought her a Mini Cooper. Their first meeting took place on June 8, 2021, after Mark spotted her on an adult website. They met at her home in Sissinghurst, near Cranbrook, Kent. Things went well, and they continued to meet occasionally after that. The second meeting took place on June 21st, nearly 2 weeks later. This time, Alexandra went to Little Bridge Farm near Hastings, Kent, a property Mark rented to meet women and for other purposes. They met 7 more times in August and September. Alexandra did not realize she was falling into a trap. On October 23, 2021, Mark sent her a text message asking if she would like to engage in a risk-free business transaction. He made an offer that involved £100,000 for 35 days at a hotel he would protect, a new ID, a straight car, and money for shopping. Mark asked her to do some simple tasks: go out for a smoke, pack the money, and buy a few things. After receiving this offer, Alexandra did some online research, which showed that she wanted to improve her children's lives. She learned about the minimum deposit for buying a house in 2021. Alexandra also intended to use the money to start a business. She searched for information such as profits from opening a sunbed shop in the UK and taxes to pay on £100,000. These actions showed Alexandra's character and desire to improve her life. Alexandra lied to her parents that she was going to the spa with friends, but in fact she was planning to meet Mark at the farm. On the morning of November 14th, she left home and was recorded on CCTV buying petrol in Cranbrook at 7:20 a.m. She arrived at Little Bridge Farm at around 8 a.m. 3 days later, on November 17th, Mark drove Alexandra's car to Holmhurst Lane, St. Leonard's, after replacing the real number plates with fake ones. The following day, November 18th, Alexandra's mother reported her daughter to the police because she had not picked her up and had stopped communicating. On November 23rd, police discovered CCTV footage of Alexandra's car following Mark's Jaguar to Little Bridge Farm. Kent police sealed off the entrance to the farm and interviewed Mark. He admitted meeting Alexandra but claimed she had left after 45 minutes. Mark agreed to allow police to take his fingerprints and DNA. 2 days later, on November 25th, police arrested Mark as the prime suspect in Alexandra Morgan's disappearance. Before we get into what happened to Alexandra, we need to go back to when she met Mark Brown. At that time, Mark had a wife named Leah Ware. She was 33, and she was a mother of 3 who does not have custody of her children. Leah first met Mark on March 25, 2018, through a prostitution website where she advertised her services. A few years later, this same website is where Mark met Alexandra Morgan. In late 2018, Mark and Leah began a relationship and moved into an apartment together. After 6 months, when their lease expired, Leah moved into a shipping container at Mark S. Little Bridge Farm. Mark describes their relationship as a roller coaster of ups and downs. Leah has had a complicated life. She received weekly benefits, which were usually administered by Mark. She had a history of drug use and mental illness, but many said she was trying to improve herself in order to gain custody of her children. Mark and Leah were in a 3-year relationship before Leah mysteriously disappeared in May 2021. On the evening of May 5th and early morning of May 6th, Leah was with Jack Tyler, a friend and convicted drug dealer. They used drugs together and had an intimate relationship that night. This was the last time anyone saw Leah. The last call from her phone was made at 8:55 a.m. on May 7th. Police believe Leah died that day. On June 8, 2021, Mark met Alexandra for the first time at her home. The meeting went well and Alexandra found Mark to be a reasonable and generous man. However, she did not know that just a month earlier, Leah, who had been in a relationship with Mark, had disappeared without a trace. During the investigation, detectives discovered important text messages from Mark. He sent them to his ex-girlfriend from high school, 5 days after meeting Alexandra Morgan. However, the content of the messages had nothing to do with Alexandra and were about Leah. The message reads, "I'll try to be careful. This happened recently. It's a nasty thing to get rid of. Just an old oil drum, 5 liters of diesel, and everything is gone. It burns so hot, it almost glows white. My actions are heartbreaking. It's ironic that a psychopath has a conscience. Investigators suspect Alexandra Morgan is dead and may not be Mark's only victim. Sussex police are appealing to the public for help in locating Leah or her body, as well as any information relating to her disappearance." After arresting Mark on November 25, 2021, police searched his farm and found a container that showed signs of having been recently burned. Inside the container, experts found bone and tooth remains. Tests confirmed that these were those of Alexandra Morgan. In a joint statement, Kent and Sussex police expressed their condolences to Alexandra and Leah's families. They confirmed that Alexandra's remains had been found, but Leah's remains have not yet been found. The investigation is ongoing and police are appealing for anyone with information. Police described Leah as a white woman, 168 centimeters tall, of slim build, with very long black hair and blue eyes. She had 3 tattoos, a dragon on her right leg, Chinese characters on her right hip, and a fairy sitting on a flower with the name Ryan on her right leg. The search of Mark's house lasted about a month and ended on January 7, 2022. During the investigation, police discovered the skeleton of a Pomeranian dog at the bottom of the pond, with a heavy object tied to its neck. Investigators believe this was Leah's dog, which Mark threw into the pond after killing Leah. On February 1, 2022, police charged Mark with the murder of Leah Ware, although they did not find her remains. Mark had previously been charged with the murder of Alexandra Morgan. Mark initially denied all charges. However, when police presented evidence of him burning Alexandra Morgan's body, Mark admitted to Alexandra's death, but maintained that it was an accident. Mark Brown's trial began on October 17, 2022. During the trial, new information about the 2 cases was revealed. The jury heard that after Leah Ware went missing on May 7, 2021, Mark regularly used her new bank card to withdraw money from her account each week. The bank card was sent to the address of his sister Cheryl. In July 2021, the jury was informed that Mark had twice withdrawn £200 from Leah Ware's account shortly after transferring £200 into his own. When asked why, Mark explained that he could have used her £200 and then paid it back, as at that point, someone owed him £430, so he could have paid it back. Prosecuting attorney Duncan Atkinson asked if it was a coincidence that Leah had died after getting a new bank card. A surprised Mark replied that he didn't understand what Duncan meant and that, as far as he knew, Leah was still alive. Duncan continued by asking if Mark was trying to take Ms. Leah's money and pointed out that Leah was in a place where money didn't mean anything. Mark was confused and said he didn't understand what Duncan was talking about at all, adding that it sounded like they were talking about two different people. During the trial for Alexandra Morton's death, Mark maintained that it was an accident. He explained that Alexandra slipped and fell on a piece of equipment in the workshop he rented at Little Bridge Farm, causing her to hit her head. When he rushed to her, he found Alexandra bleeding profusely. He grabbed a towel to try to stop the bleeding. But when he lifted her head to put the towel under, more blood came out. Prosecuting attorney Duncan Atkinson objected to the defendant's testimony, stating that when the defendant first saw the victim lying on her back on the ground, there was a lot of blood around her head. This clearly showed that she was seriously injured and needed immediate help, especially medical attention. This was obvious before the defendant did anything else. Mark replied that he was panicking and his first reaction was to grab a towel to stop the bleeding. After performing CPR and checking for breathing by holding a mirror to Alexandra Morgan's mouth and nose, Mark confirmed that she was dead. Over the next 5 minutes, he did 3 things. He used his sweater to block the blood, he went outside to vomit, and he retrieved his phone to call 911. He explained that he then decided to cover up the whole thing by wrapping Alexandra in a sleeping bag and wrapping a towel around her head to stop the bleeding. He questioned how he could prove it was an accident and admitted that the decision to cover it up was stupid and the worst mistake of his life. Mark then decided to dispose of Alexandra's body using an incinerator he had built from an old oil drum earlier that year and which he had often used to burn rubbish. "I had heard stories about burning dead bodies," he said, "and I didn't want anyone to stumble upon a body lying around." Mark therefore maintained that he had nothing to do with Leah Ware's disappearance and believed she was still alive, while Alexandra's death was assumed an accident. At the trial, the court heard testimony from Mark's boss, Alan, who said that Mark had warned him that the police might come to arrest him. This conversation took place on November 24th. When Alan asked why the police might arrest him, Mark replied, "For double murder." This answer was significant because Mark implicitly admitted that Leah Ware was dead and that Alexandra Morgan's death was not an accident. Mark denied those words, claiming he only mentioned a 25-year sentence for one murder, not a double murder. Prosecutor Duncan asked about the murder, and Mark admitted his feelings about Alexandra's case made him act as he did, despite his inability to prove his innocence. The jury also heard that Mark had deliberately smeared Alexandra and Leah reputations, as the prosecutor put it, to create a false image of the women. What people should remember about Leah and Alexandra is that they were always smiling and happy in life. They both deserve to be remembered by their loved ones for the wonderful qualities they were. On December 1st, 2022, a jury of 12 found Mark, 41, guilty on all counts. Judge Nicholas Hilliard said, "This is an extremely serious case and the impact on the victim's family is immeasurable." He announced that Mark would be sentenced to life in prison and that he would have to decide what minimum time Mark should serve, or even whether to grant clemency. The judge stressed that if Mark revealed what he had done to Leah Ware's body, he would take that information into account when sentencing. However, Mark did not take this opportunity. Before the judge delivered his verdict, the court heard from Leah Ware's mother, Rebecca Martin, about the impact the case had had on the family. "Mark continues to cause our family pain by not revealing what happened. Leah lost her life because Mark Brown wanted to satisfy his dark desires," she said. "He controlled and manipulated every aspect of her life. When she was no longer of any value, he abandoned her like a lifeless object." The court also heard from Alexandra Morgan's parents, who said Alexandra was intelligent, energetic, and determined to succeed. Despite the challenges she faced, she overcame them and held out hope for her future and the child she loved dearly. On January 13, 2023, the court sentenced Mark Brown to 2 life terms. He will be eligible for parole after 49 years. Judge Hilliard imposed the sentence in absentia because Mark refused to appear. He said, "No sentence can ever measure the number of lives lost. Nothing can undo the defendant's actions, it cannot. His conscience is not troubled by what he has done." The case of Elizabeth Nicole Forshee Cyperta. Elizabeth was born on May 13, 1978, in Truckee, California. She lived with her parents and younger brother. When Elizabeth was 13, the Cyperta family moved across the street. Michael and Sally Cyperta had 2 young children and were struggling to balance work and family. Michael wanted Sally to go back to work, so they decided to find a babysitter. Michael suggested hiring Elizabeth, then 14, to babysit their children. Sally agreed, and Elizabeth began babysitting for the neighbor's family. Elizabeth grew attached to Michael and Sally's children as she spent more time with them. The children also enjoyed being around her. When Elizabeth was 15, her father passed away, a traumatic event that deeply affected her. According to her mother, Donna Forshee, Elizabeth became more sensitive and vulnerable after this event. She began to admire and grow closer to Michael Cyperta, seeing him as an ideal father figure. Elizabeth believes that Michael loves his children unconditionally and supports their interests. Elizabeth used to babysit Michael and Sally's children during the day. However, she started staying at their house until late at night. This continued for about 2 years. One day, Michael decided to move to Iowa with his family to be closer to his relatives. He invited Elizabeth to come along as a babysitter. Elizabeth's mother, Donna, strongly objected and tried to stop her daughter, even calling Child Protective Services to intervene. However, Donna's efforts were in vain. Elizabeth was too attached to Michael, Sally, and their 2 children. Although she was still in high school, she was determined to stick with her decision and move to Winfield, Iowa with Cyperta's family. After Elizabeth moved away, her mother Donna and her best friend Shannon Gerber maintained regular contact with her, either by phone or by weekly letters. Elizabeth graduated from high school in Iowa in May 1997. Donna attended her graduation and gave her daughter an emerald and diamond ring, which Elizabeth treasured. During this time, Michael divorced his wife, Sally, and began a relationship with Elizabeth. After the divorce, Sally left the children with Michael and Elizabeth and moved away. Although Sally maintained contact with her children, she cut off all contact with Michael and stopped speaking to Elizabeth. Michael, then in her 40s, immediately demonstrated his controlling nature. He limited what Elizabeth could and could not do, as well as who she could talk to. He attempted to control every aspect of Elizabeth's life. From the beginning, their relationship seemed dysfunctional. As a result, Elizabeth's mother and best friend Shannon found it increasingly difficult to contact her. Michael did not like Elizabeth talking to them and would often get angry if she did. As a result, Elizabeth would only dare to call them when Michael was not home. During this time, Elizabeth became friends with Harper Tracy through church. Harper noticed that Elizabeth had suffered 5 or 6 injuries during their friendship, including finger marks on her neck and bruises on her stomach. Harper's daughter, Sadie, who was about 7 years old, knew Michael's children through church and occasionally played at their home. Sadie remembers one time when she visited, she witnessed Michael pushing Elizabeth down the stairs and kneeling on her. Harper also remembers Elizabeth arriving at church in a state of panic and fear after fleeing a violent argument with Michael. Elizabeth confided that she was afraid of Michael and could not take any more abuse. Harper discovered multiple bruises on Elizabeth's stomach and marks on her arms. Elizabeth stayed in Harper's trailer for a month. During that time, Michael appeared near the trailer almost every day and acted threateningly. He would park his truck about 10 feet away from the trailer and tease Elizabeth. Specifically, he threatened her by saying that Elizabeth would be isolated and no one would find her if she did not listen to him. He left hazmat notices and a torn cat collar outside, along with a message warning that she would disappear like the cat if she did not return. He also threatened to harm the family's animals and began blackmailing her with videotapes and photos he had. According to Harper, he threatened to kill Elizabeth and dispose of her body 6 times. Harper called the police to stop him, but unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. There were clearly many warning signs about Michael. Everyone saw him as someone to stay away from. However, Elizabeth was young and naive, so she still hoped that Michael would change. Unfortunately, at the age of 40, people rarely change their behavior and attitude towards others. After a long time of pressure from Michael, eventually, Elizabeth decided to leave Harper's trail to live with Michael. They married in January 1998 in Mount Pleasant. Despite her attempts to prevent the marriage, Harper attended their wedding. Afterwards, Michael took the initiative to cut off all contact between Harper and Elizabeth. At Michael's request, Elizabeth finally told Harper not to come to their house anymore. Harper was not the only one concerned about Elizabeth and Michael's marriage. Elizabeth's mother, Donna, also disapproved of the relationship and refused to come to Iowa for her daughter's wedding. However, in June 2000, Elizabeth went to California to attend her younger brother's high school graduation. Although Michael stayed in Iowa, he continued to keep an eye on Elizabeth. During the 3 days Elizabeth stayed with her mother, Michael called her repeatedly. He was concerned that Donna was trying to influence Elizabeth not to return to Iowa. After each call, Elizabeth felt sad and confused. She considered leaving her husband, but was not sure. To reassure Michael, Elizabeth moved out of her mother's house and moved in with Shannon Gerber, her childhood friend. Shannon had kept in touch with Elizabeth since Elizabeth moved to Iowa. They tried to talk every month, often calling when Michael was not home. However, Elizabeth's move to live with her friend did not lessen Michael's anger. Instead, he began harassing Shannon by calling her repeatedly. Most of the calls were threatening. Shannon recalled Michael threatening Elizabeth. He screamed at her and said he would kill her if she did not come home. Michael also threatened to kill Elizabeth's mother, younger brother, Shannon, and her young son. He called her constantly, day and night, sometimes dozens of times an hour. Finally, Shannon's husband couldn't take it anymore and turned off the phone. This clearly made Michael even angrier. Shannon begged Elizabeth not to return to Iowa. "I didn't want her to go because I was afraid I would never see her again," Shannon confided. She deliberately took a detour to the airport, hoping Elizabeth would miss her flight. However, the flight was delayed and Elizabeth was still able to catch it. After returning to Mount Pleasant, Iowa, Elizabeth began working at Experian. There, she met Sarah Thomas, a coworker who quickly became her best friend. Because Sarah lived near the Sipura family home, she often took Elizabeth home after work. During these trips, they talked a lot and Elizabeth gradually trusted Sarah. She shared with Sarah about her difficult relationship with her husband, Michael, and even showed Sarah the bruises on her body that Michael had caused. Elizabeth and Sarah became very close to each other, close enough to cause problems. One day, while Michael was away, his 2 children peered through the bedroom keyhole and saw Sarah and Elizabeth getting intimate. When Elizabeth discovered that the children had witnessed the scene, she hastily packed up and moved in with Sarah. When Sarah's girlfriend, Terry, went outside to walk the dog, Michael came over and asked her to call Sarah's work phone and ask Elizabeth to return home. He had a bottle of alcohol in his hand, and his children were following him and crying. Michael explained that his wife had left him, she was not answering his calls, and he did not know what to do. When Elizabeth and Sarah entered the apartment, they saw Michael and Terry waiting for them. Frightened, Elizabeth and Sarah left. Michael shouted at Terry to follow him. They got into the car and gave chase. The two couples met face to face in a nearby parking lot. Terry started fighting with Sarah because she felt betrayed. Elizabeth was sitting in the car at the time and was afraid to get out. Cursing, screaming, and threatening, Michael approached Elizabeth and dragged her out through the window of the car. During the struggle, Elizabeth suffered a lacerated rib, and her shirt got torn. Sarah and Elizabeth fled to a nearby gas station, where they reported the assault to the police. The state charged Michael with first-degree burglary and domestic abuse assault. The court approved the no-contact order protecting Elizabeth. Terry packed her things and left, so Elizabeth and Sarah started living together. Michael continued to harass Sarah despite a ban. He would sit across the street, shouting insults or verbally abusing her. Additionally, Sarah received numerous incoming phone calls, but whenever she picked up, the caller would remain silent. She filed a report with the police, who worked with her phone company to set up a trap on her line to track the origin of these calls. Over a 3-week period, from June 26th to July 16th, Sarah's phone records revealed Michael made 162 calls to her apartment. On July 16, 2000, 1 month after her breakup with Michael, Sarah left for work at 10:30 p.m. At the time, Elizabeth was asleep on the couch. Their dog was safely locked in the bathroom to avoid disturbing Elizabeth when Sarah returned home at 4 a.m. However, upon arriving back, Sarah was surprised to find that Elizabeth had vanished. There were no signs of forced entry or a struggle, and Elizabeth's personal documents remained intact. The dog was still locked in the bathroom. Sarah decided to go to bed. When she awoke the next morning, Elizabeth was still missing. It became clear that Elizabeth had left without taking her purse, clothes, or other essential belongings, and she did not leave behind any note or explanation. Sarah reported Elizabeth's disappearance to the police 24 hours after first discovering she was gone. Elizabeth was 22 years old when she disappeared. The police launched an investigation, and of course, Michael was their first suspect. On July 16th, the day Elizabeth disappeared, Michael started phoning the apartment around 3 p.m., logging more than a dozen calls through the evening. He last called at 10:56 p.m., that is, he stopped making calls 26 minutes after Sarah left for work and left Elizabeth alone. On July 17th, Michael was supposed to be at work. His friend Jared agreed to watch Michael's children. Jared testified he found Michael was pretty intoxicated when he arrived at his house around 5:30 a.m. Jared said Michael told him Elizabeth had stayed overnight and left around 5 a.m. Michael decided not to go to work that morning. Police called Michael the next day, July 18th, to ask if he had heard from Elizabeth. He said he had not. On July 20th, officers came to his house to let him know Elizabeth was missing. Michael said his taking a sick day from work on July 17th, the day after Elizabeth disappeared, was a coincidence. Michael also stated that due to their breakup, he hadn't been eating and had been getting cramps. Elizabeth seemed to disappear into thin air. She didn't contact her family or friends, her bank account was untouched, and she had not even received her salary for the last month. The investigators knew that Elizabeth could not just leave without documents and money. All the friends she could have stayed with knew nothing about her whereabouts. The police interviewed residents and distributed flyers with an image and description of Elizabeth, but none of these actions gave the desired result. In early September 2000, Larry Headland, an agent with the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation, interviewed Michael. During the interview, Michael claimed that he and Elizabeth had a harmonious relationship and denied any allegations of abuse between them. When asked about the attack on Elizabeth on June 16th, Michael admitted that it was an unusual action on his part. He explained that he had been drinking and that his emotions had taken over, leading to his inappropriate actions. Initially, Michael denied making the harassing phone calls to Sarah's apartment. However, when presented with evidence from the call records, he admitted responsibility. The agent then pointed out that the calls to Michael's apartment had stopped the night Elizabeth went missing. This caused Michael to become stressed. Michael explained that he just wanted to avoid arrest and did not want to be charged or held responsible for anything. That's why he lied about the phone calls. He objected when Larry suggested that Elizabeth was dead. After this interview, the police obtained a search warrant for Michael's home. In Michael's bedroom, the police found an unlocked safe. Inside or on top of the safe, an officer found a $2,000 gold pendant that Michael had given Elizabeth and a V-shaped diamond and emerald ring that she had received from her mother as a graduation gift. Elizabeth only removed the ring when she was showering or soaking in the tub, otherwise, it was on her finger. In police photos taken after Michael attacked Elizabeth, the ring was still on her hand. Elizabeth had not been back to Michael's house since. So how did the ring end up in Michael's safe? When the police asked for an explanation, Michael said that Elizabeth must have left it behind when she moved out. However, officer pointed out that Elizabeth was still wearing the ring in a photo taken on June 16th, the day of the attack. Michael could not explain why the ring was in his bedroom. There are some suspicious points in Elizabeth's disappearance. Michael abruptly stopped contacting her on the day she disappeared, although the police only notified him 4 days later. This suggests that Michael may be hiding something. However, the police need concrete evidence to charge him. Time has passed so quickly that it is difficult to find clues. One possibility is that Elizabeth voluntarily went into hiding. But her family does not believe this. Although the case has been quiet for many years, her mother, Donna, has not lost hope that her daughter will return. Every year, she travels to Iowa, where Elizabeth used to live, to organize activities to raise awareness about her daughter's disappearance. In 2010, Donna rented a billboard with Elizabeth's picture and offered a $20,000 reward for any information about her daughter. Donna said she was concerned that something might have happened to her daughter, but she was hopeful that she would eventually be found. Someone definitely knows what happened to my daughter, and I hope that us coming out will jog their memory, she said. 10 years after her daughter's disappearance, Donna has developed her own theories about what happened. In an interview, she said, "I think the person called her and lured her out of the apartment to meet them. Then they argued and something bad happened that night." Despite the best efforts of the police and her family, Elizabeth's fate remains a mystery. Since her disappearance in 2000, investigators have searched 79 different locations but have not found Elizabeth's body. They entered her information into the National Crime Information Center's Missing Persons database. 17 years later, in 2017, the investigation was reopened. By this time, Michael Saiperda had moved to Colorado. Police reviewed all the evidence and interviews. They discovered a key detail that had previously been overlooked. Jared, Michael's friend who was assigned to watch Michael's children on July 17, 2000, told police that when he arrived at Michael's house at 5:30 a.m., he found Michael quite drunk. According to Jared's testimony, Michael said that Elizabeth had stayed the night and left around 5 a.m. However, in previous interviews, Michael had never mentioned Elizabeth sleeping over at his house. More significantly, Elizabeth's jewelry was found in Michael's safe. Authorities decided to arrest Michael 17 years after Elizabeth went missing. Although her body was never found, investigators believe that Elizabeth was dead and that Michael was the culprit. In November 2017, Michael was arrested in Colorado and extradited to Iowa, where he was charged with first-degree murder in the death of his wife Elizabeth. Donna said, "This is the best news we've had in 17 years. We've waited a long time and are so glad that he's finally been arrested." Michael later waived his right to a jury trial. The loss of key physical evidence, especially the victim's body, made it significantly more difficult for prosecutors to prove guilt. Without a body, Forensic experts could not determine the cause of death, and the jury could not directly observe the victim's injuries or view crime scene photos. The defense argued that the prosecutor's goal was not to find the truth, but to convict Michael by looking for inconsistencies in witness testimony. Although the trial took place 18 years after the incident, the defense acknowledged during closing arguments that a body was not required to establish a homicide. However, Michael still challenged the state's evidence of Elizabeth's death. The district court concluded that the state had proven her death beyond a reasonable doubt. The court held that any theory that Elizabeth was still alive and could reappear at any time was unrealistic. The state presented evidence that Michael was the last person to speak to Elizabeth at 10:56 p.m. on July 16th, which he himself admitted. The district court noted Jared's testimony that Michael told Elizabeth to stay at his house that night. In addition, there were other suspicious circumstances. Michael unexpectedly left work on July 17th and did not call Elizabeth's apartment again, even though the police did not officially report her missing until July 20th. From this evidence, the state established that Michael's hatred of Elizabeth led to murder. Because Michael was controlling and possessive of Elizabeth, it was highly likely that he intentionally caused her physical harm when she decided to leave him for someone else. The strained relationship between them was clear evidence of Michael's intentional intent to cause harm. The state presented evidence that Michael had repeatedly threatened to kill Elizabeth and dispose of her body so that no one would find it. From these repeated threats, the jury could conclude that Michael had intended to kill Elizabeth. The court reviewed the evidence and made a crucial decision. They discovered that Elizabeth had opened a new bank account just 9 days before her disappearance, but had not withdrawn her last paycheck. They concluded that she was dead. After carefully evaluating all the evidence, the court found that Michael was responsible for Elizabeth's death. On June 25, 2018, Michael Cyperda, 58, was convicted of first-degree murder. On August 23, 2018, the court sentenced him to life in prison without parole and ordered him to pay $150,000 in restitution for Elizabeth's death. However, the story does not end there. In September 2020, the Iowa Court of Appeals changed Michael Cyperda's conviction from first-degree murder to second-degree murder. Judge Mary Tabor, in a 30-page ruling, noted that while there was enough evidence to conclude that Elizabeth was dead and that Michael was responsible, the prosecutor failed to prove that Michael intended to kill Elizabeth. This led to the reduced charge. The case was particularly difficult because there was no body, weapon, or crime scene. Michael asked to be released or at least given a new trial. Ultimately, the court sentenced Michael Cyperda to 50 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years.